Sword of Coming Chapter 12:18. Chapter 12:18. Go to the mountain. The air in the mountains is still cool after the rain, the days are long and nothing happens, and Yen sits leisurely. The people at the table at the foot of the mountain, one big and one small, all had their legs crossed, eating melon seeds and chatting about various things, just passing the time leisurely. The two of them are good brothers who are famous for their high ambitions in Luolu Mountain. There is no need to cultivate Tao and no need to practice boxing. What? Both of us are top-notch geniuses. Leave aside geniuses, people who can climb mountains and practice Taoism with the same physical ability, must avoid certain potholes on the way to practice, such as the Talisman Road. The threshold is high, the money is high, and the guidance of a master is also needed. Otherwise, if you are not careful, you will be killed. You will waste your life, talk about immortality and talk about soaring. This makes a woman afraid of marrying the wrong man and entering the wrong profession. It's absolutely true. What Brother De Feng said is absolutely true. What he said is absolutely true. Some pits are shallower. If you have suffered a loss, you can still climb out if the opportunity is bad. But some pits are very deep. If you jump in, you will not be able to climb out. What you are most afraid of is encountering a bottomless pit with no bottom. Brother Dafeng is one of the few martial arts masters in Aquarius continent. He learns martial arts and practices boxing. The threshold for this profession is not high, so it is not a trap, right? This is not called a pit. Zheng Dafeng nodded and said, it's a cliff. Qin Lingjun rolled his eyes and said nothing. It would be unconscionable if he echoed this. Zheng Dafeng said with a smile, of course the number of people who learn martial arts outside the mountains is far more than the number of Taoists in the mountains, but you can't think that learning martial arts is not a trap just because of this. You can't see Qin Pingan and Chao Xi either. I'm young, I'm high level, I'm flying in the sky. I think it's so easy to get into this industry. At this time, on the mountain road not far away, an old immortal with immortal style and Taoism came. He had 3 long beards and elegant Taoist clothes. He was Lu Yong, the master of the Qinghu Palace in Tonggishao. The old man holds a fly whisk in his hand and walks steadily, making him look very majestic. In the words of my old cook, if there is not a land on the mountain, and if there is not a county magistrate in Gongmen, there is no way he can escape from this kind of momentum. Qin Lingjun took a closer look, stood up hurriedly, shook his sleeves and strode forward. Hey, isn't this Brother Lu? There are only a few visitors here. The old man stopped, nodded and said with a smile, come here uninvited, nagging. Then Lu Yong added, I saw fellow Taoist Jing Qing and Grandmaster Zheng from a distance. What a talker, he has the aura of Qingxiao and he sits like a white jade figure. Zheng Dafeng was not a janitor now, so he didn't get up to entertain guests. Hearing Lu Yong's comment, he was greatly impressed. He was indeed a real person. He did have some true knowledge and insights and he told the truth to everyone. Qin Lingjun sighed like the mountain master. You just say some polite words, who are you looking down on? Brother Lu comes to our Luapa mountain, and he still needs to say hello to others? This is a shabby and dishonest thing to say, and it seems that we are here. Are you snobbish and don't care about old feelings at all? It doesn't matter if you slap me in the face. Who of us is following whom? At worst, we can just drink 2 cups at the wine table and it will be over. Slapping my master in the face is not allowed, absolutely not allowed. Lu Yong laughed loudly, changed his position and held his fist for Jianghu, shaking it vigorously. It's true that in being pretentious, I went back to the table and punished myself with 3 bowls first. Qin Lingjun asked from the bottom of his heart, Brother Lu is a very busy man now. What is it? The letter didn't explain clearly. I have to climb the mountain in person? Could it be that I encountered some difficulties? Can you tell me in private? I will help you if you can. If you don't help, you are your grandson. Lu Yong hesitated for a moment, but chose to say straightforwardly, fellow Taoist Jing Qing, to be honest, I have a direct disciple named Zhao Zhu. I'm not just bragging. Zhao Zhu's Taoist qualifications are not bad, and his character is even better. Yes, I'm just wondering if I can help this apprentice get a seat at the back of your Jisa Peak Patriarch's Hall, so that he can be a guest who can sit in on the proceedings. In this way, when I take it off in the future with a heavy burden on my shoulders, I plan to take care of myself in old age, so it becomes more and more justifiable for Zhao Zhu to inherit the position of palace master. For such a big matter, just sending a letter from Feijin does not seem sincere enough, just like Qinghu Palace giving orders to Luolu Mountain. Lu Yong didn't think he had such a big face, so he had to make this trip in person to meet Master Chen and discuss the matter carefully. Well, I have some confidence. Qin Lingjun rubbed his chin, thought carefully for a moment and said with a serious expression, Zhao, I remember that I met him and he is a good person. If he is just an ordinary guest, it is not difficult at all, but it must be said that we have a position in the ancestral hall. Yes, this is no small matter. I can't help the mountain master and agree randomly, but I can guarantee two things. One is that when the mountain master returns to the mountain, I will go to the mountain master in private to help Zhao. Speak good words to the child and help him. Furthermore, if the mountain master thinks this matter is feasible and really wants to include it in the Jisa Peak discussion process and discuss it in the ancestral hall, I will definitely be the first to support it without any hesitation. Lu Yong thanked him sincerely and asked in a low voice, Master Qin is not in the mountain now? Qin Lingjun hummed and said, I'm going down the mountain. My master is always so busy. The boy in green chuckled, that's why we can be so free. You must make no mistakes when you are busy and make no mistakes when you are free. All these require real ability. The old master smiled and said, the atmosphere in the mountain is so good, Taoist fellow Jingqing deserves a lot of credit. Qin Lingjun silently memorized this truth, it must be a good word of advice so that he can argue with some stupid girl who only teaches him how to do nothing. Lu Yong, who planned to live here for a while, met Jing Dafeng and chatted for a few words. They had a similar atmosphere. One of them praised Lu Yong. He has a fairy spirit, which is rare, and he is more humane and valuable. One said that Brother Zheng worked hard and achieved great results, but regarded his fame as dirt and had fewer desires than a Taoist. The two sides talked more and they became more and more compatible, so they made an appointment for a drink. Mr. Lu signed with Taoist Master Xianhui again, and Qin Lingjun led him up the mountain to stay at an elegant house. The relationship between Luolu Mountain and Qinghu Palace is somewhat similar. Yamashita's worldly kinship relationship between two villages is a bit stronger than ordinary allies. Before Qin Lingjun came down the mountain, he saw another unfamiliar face. Zheng Dafeng clicked his tongue and said in surprise, what a good day it is today, all the guests are here. I saw a graceful woman on the mountain road, coming slowly. She was like a fairy sister whose feathers were often smoky. After taking a closer look, I found a mole on the tip of her nose. Far from being a pity for a beautiful jade, it actually had a finishing touch of beauty. Zheng Dafeng hurriedly straightened his clothes, planning to go and meet the unidentified woman in person. She was the former janitor, wasn't she still the janitor? We in Luoyuashan are not willing to burn bridges across rivers. After meeting the woman, she directly handed out a certificate. Zheng Dafeng took it and was quite surprised after confirming that it was not a forgery. It was actually a customs clearance document issued directly by the Chinese Confucian Temple. I heard from the gossip that over the years, the Confucian Temple has only taken out more than 100 copies? Generally speaking, the Qi practitioners who receive this honor are mostly local monks in the wilderness, as well as spies who have been placed in the wilderness by xianxia and have not returned home for a long time. The name written on the pass is xianxia and the road name is Xuanhu. However, his place of origin and sect were not stated. The female cultivator smiled and said, I dare not hide it. I actually come from the wild world. In the past, the dojo was located in Jinsui City. Now I am a monk who has not yet been included in the genealogy of Baidi City. Zheng Dafeng suddenly realized it and said that this Taoist name looked familiar. He turned out to be the city lord of Jinsui City. A genuine city lord in the immortal realm. Nowadays the surname is Zheng, which makes sense. Qingjia said in extremely mellow Dali Mandarin, this trip to Aquarius continent is only for two things. One is to follow Mr. Zheng's decree, find Gu Kan, and assist him in establishing the sect with all his strength. The other is to come to see a certain person. A senior from his hometown can trace his origins. This senior can be regarded as the founder of our Jinsui City. Jinsui City can be what it is today, and Qingjia can be where it is today. It is all thanks to him. Recognizing the ancestors and returning to the clan is the meaning of the title. Now that Jinquiqing belongs to the vassal sect of Baidi City, and the matter of returning to the clan has been settled, it is even more necessary for me to come here and recognize my ancestor. Zheng Dafeng knew this clearly. Xiao and Mo did indeed leave 6 holes of Dao in the wild world, but one time when everyone got together to chat, according to Xiao and Mo, there seemed to be only one line of incense left there. It is possible that the incense has been cut off. Logically speaking, Xiao Mo's remaining incense should not be from Jin Suiqing. Even the Qigong practitioners here in Xianxia have heard of such a famous sect in Wild Golden Suiqing. For example, Zheng Dafeng knew that this sect was famous for having many female cultivators, good robes and beautiful clothes. Female nuns wearing cassocks are even better. For 10 days and a half they changed one thing every day and never brought the same one. Although in the end they still ended up in the same place, they had to take off their clothes. Just thinking about it can make the bachelors laugh. Zheng Dafeng wiped his mouth and explained with a smile, Xiaomo is not on the mountain and has gone on a long trip, but he will be back soon. I believe fellow Taoist Qingjia will not wait long. Qingjia smiled and said, I haven't had time to ask my Taoist friends for their names yet. Zheng Dafeng said, what a coincidence, our surname is Zheng. We were the same family 500 years ago. My sister is a few years older. Since we are both surnamed Zheng, it is not appropriate to call me Xiao Zheng. Just call me Xiao Feng. Zheng Dafeng invited, I would like to invite Taoist fellow Xuanhu to go to the humble residence for a visit. The place is simple. The customs in the wild world are not to be disrespectful. What's more, Qingjia is still the lord of a city. He has been mediating between Yangji and Fei Fei, who are both the throne demons, for many years. Now he has followed Zheng Zhuzhong. Qingjia didn't feel the need for herself and the man in front of her to be arrogant and submissive, so she directly interrupted the sloppy man's greasy words and said with a smile, I want disturb Daoyu Zheng's residence. I would like to ask if I can go hiking and take a walk. I only had a cursory glance at the scenery on the mountain road, and I have really admired Master Yingwen's dojo for a long time. Zheng Dafeng immediately changed his mind, patted his chest and said, It's easy to talk about. I can walk down all the roads, big and small, long and short in this mountain with my eyes closed. I will take you up the mountain. The immortal captain was speechless. Qingjia probably never imagined that he would meet such a person at the foot of the mountain before he entered the mountain. The Luo mountain in her impression was not like this. After all, the dojo was founded by the young Yingguan himself, so it should be a well-guarded and orderly mountain top. Because he didn't know who the man named Zheng was in Luopa Mountain, what his background was, and what his relationship was with Chen Yingguan, Qingjia had no choice but to follow him up the stairs and climb the mountain slowly. Fortunately, the trip was worthwhile. When Qingjia got her wish and truly set foot on Luolu Mountain, the discomfort caused by the man around her was largely diluted. After recording the files and names with the Taoist priest just now, before Qingjia formally moved up the mountain and passed the mountain gate archway, he stopped and took a deep breath, looked up at the plaque and bowed. If you are not a monk from the Wild Demon clan, you will never be able to truly understand the complex and heavy thoughts of Qingjia and the others. Because he has never been a true enemy of the Great Wall of Sword Qi and the last hidden official. Qin Lingjun sent Brother Lu to his residence. On the way back to the foot of the mountain he saw Zheng Dafeng hooking up with a random girl there. He felt sad for a moment. Brother Dafeng, he has been single for many years. It's hard. Qin Lingjun sneaked over to Xianwei first and asked in a low voice, Who is it? Taoist Xianwei answered from the bottom of his heart, It's a foreign Taoist friend. His surname is Zheng, his name is Qingjia and his Taoist name is Xuanhu. He seems to be here to see Guqin. After all, unlike Zheng Dafeng, Xianwei couldn't see much inside information from the genealogy. He never wondered about the visitor's background. Qin Lingjun nodded, thinking he understood. It is estimated that this woman is the homeless wild cultivator of Xianxia who has no way to seek refuge. She can't find the gate of the temple in Baidi City in Middle-earth even with the pig's head, because she heard about the porcelain relationship between her master and that little slug somewhere. Because of the relationship, I just want to ask my master to help me soothe my cheeks, say a few good words to Guqin, and make an introduction? The boy in green sighed softly. It was not easy either. Climbing together, listening to Zheng Dafeng's chatter, he changed his ways to be attentive and approachable. Qin Lingjun, who was walking behind, clenched his fists with both hands and pressed them hard against his cheeks to suppress his laughter. Passing by an open house, there was an old man lying on a wicker chair in the courtyard. He was resting his mind with his eyes closed. He was breathing long and seemed to be in a light sleep. He was holding a yellow cattail leaf fan on his abdomen. As he passed the open gate of the courtyard, Qingjia happened to see a scene out of the corner of his eye. A flower that seemed to have been persuaded by the spring breeze to travel far away from the branch, swayed and fell on the old man's forehead. She took a few more glances. The old man is similar to the one next to him named Zheng. He seems to be a martial artist, and his level is definitely not low. Qingjia's realm was high enough, and he could see that the old man who was in a trance like a monk was not pretending to be asleep, but was really calmed down and wandering around. It is rare for a martial artist to be like this, but for Qingjia it is not that big of a fuss. After all, what she has seen and heard is the affairs of high-ranking people in the wild world. The man named Zheng next to me, even if he were 20 years younger, I believe his appearance would not be much better. But the old man in the hospital, if his age were doubled and based on his magnanimity he would be a handsome man? Zheng Dafeng rubbed his hands, Was it accidental or intentional? The old chef really has a skill. Will Jiang Taigong take the bait if he is fishing? This trick can be learned. Looking at Zheng Dafeng, who was eager to try, Chen Lingjun felt that he had to be a staunch friend for once, and said from the bottom of his heart, "Brother Dafeng, listen to my advice, don't learn this craft. Trust me once and the result will only be. It's just the opposite. No matter how bad the old cook's appearance is, when he shuts up and doesn't speak he still looks a bit like a dog. If it were that fallen flower that hit you on the head in the eyes of a woman, it would feel like, he can say no?" Zheng Dafeng said with a smile, "Let's talk. I'm all ears." Chen Lingjun lowered his voice and said, "You fell into a trap." Zheng Dafeng held the boy in green's head and said, "You can use metaphors now, you're quite good at talking." Chen Lingjun sighed, feeling sorry for himself and said, "It's true that my words of advice are offensive to my ears." Zheng Dafeng lost interest all of a sudden, so he made an excuse and asked Chen Lingjun to lead the way. The man looked gloomy, his back was drawn, and he went down the mountain alone. Zhu Lian often behaves like this now, treating sleep as a form of spiritual practice, and everyone is accustomed to it. According to the intelligence leaked by Xiaomi Li, it seems that the old cook has arranged a fight with the good mountain master. The location is in the capital city of Nanyuan State, which is inside his blessed land. This winter the fight will happen when it snows. Zheng Dafeng walked out of the Bluestone Path, a spiritual path to the main peak of Jiling Peak, which can be climbed up or down. After hesitating for a while, Zheng Dafeng walked towards the top of the mountain. He turned his head and looked at the foot of the mountain. Behind a pillar of the mountain gate archway, there would be a bamboo chair. Sitting on it was a fake Taoist priest who was not even allowed to teach him his private jar. In fact, his name is Nian Jing, Xianhui is just his name, and he also gave himself the name xuanhuan, to travel around the world. He was abducted by the mountain master from the Great Li capital city, so those who followed the mountain master in Luopa Mountain were accustomed to calling him Xianhui Taoist master. Only when Chen Lingjun was familiar with him would he deliberately turn Xuanxu upside down and jokingly call him Taoist master Xuanxu, pretending to be Xuanxu. Xianhui's realm is not high and his face is not thin. He has been wandering around the world for many years and he is still ashamed of this? On the contrary, I like what fellow Taoist Jingqing said. Taoist Xianhui watches the door every day in Tianqing, hiding a book in each sleeve. When there is no one around he reads the more serious one. When there is someone around he reads the more serious one. It's raining, what else can I do? Just stay indoors and take shelter from the rain. At most, I held an umbrella and pretended to sit at the gate of the mountain. I was as cold as a quail. I couldn't sit there for long before I went back to the house to read a book. According to a rough estimate, it rained for 9 consecutive days in the vast world. Qingming Tianxia about 5 days. In the Western Buddhist kingdom it may be 4 days. A day and a half in the wild world. Colorful world, half a day. Zheng Dafeng originally thought that Xianhui would inexplicably break into several realms during this world reign. It is not unusual to break through the realm, but it is strange not to break through the realm. But things are just so weird. I never thought that Xianhui's realm was so stable, that it was unreasonable and untouchable. The rain stopped now. The Taoist priest was in the second realm when he came to Luopa Mountain, and he is still in the second realm now. After all, cultivation is a family matter. It is not easy for Zheng Dafeng to remind him of anything, and it is not appropriate to talk too much. It is often said at the foot of the mountain that one word reveals the secret of heaven, but on the mountain there is a taboo of, it is a pity to reveal it. Zheng Dafeng held the back of his head with both hands and swayed his shoulders as he walked up the mountain. The mountain breeze blew on his face, feeling refreshed. Hey, since Miss Sen's graceful figure is not seen on the mountain road, she must be practicing boxing on the white jade square on the top of the mountain. The woman is punching, tossing and turning, ups and downs, how can it not look good? Slowly walking up the stairs, Zheng Dafeng straightened his clothes, spit in his hands and smoothed his hair from his temples. In the past his master didn't like to chat with him. Senior brother Li Er didn't know if he was pretending to pass on the imperial edict or because he saw his junior brother was more handsome than him and deliberately made disgusting remarks to him. He said that the reason why Zheng Dafeng was not good at learning martial arts, praying to gods was ineffective, and he was devout. Being dishonest means not being able to succeed at a high level and not working at a low level, and you end up in a situation where you can't rely on both sides. You can't learn anything and you can't be good at martial arts. Just because you are a soft-eared person with an uncertain mind, and you don't know what you really want. People who want and pursue what they want. Over the years, in Feishing City under the colorful world, Zheng Dafeng chewed these heavy words over and over again, and knew that the truth was like this, otherwise he would not have thought of building a temple next to Dadu as a shrine. But deep down Zheng Dafeng is still lazy. Not much better than Zhong Qin, who thinks about lunch and dinner after breakfast every day, and still thinks about making midnight snack after dinner. The common man wants to do what he wants. When he goes out, there are others who are flattering him and chasing his butt. When he returns home, he has a group of wives and concubines, a mountain of gold and silver. What Taoists want is to climb up one level at a time, to be like a land who can prolong life, and to be immortal, to soar mistily hoping to live as long as heaven and earth. Zheng Dafeng took all this very lightly. Just think of it as a dog that can't change its habit of eating shit. Zheng Dafeng climbed to the top of Jiling Peak first. He didn't see Xinyuanji, so he planned to go to the back mountain again. The little girl named Xuanhuan seemed to be shy every time he saw him. Isn't it interesting to him? The girl has good eyesight. I don't know whether she covets her appearance or recognizes her excellent martial arts skills. Both? Alas, they have to live up to their infatuation again. Zheng Dafeng walked around the original mountain temple on the top of the mountain, lay down next to the railing, and looked at the mountain stretching to the north. His eyes were full of the color of indigo, which was especially lovely after the rain. I wonder if that girl from Sudian could learn the true martial arts when she saw the senior brother who had never met her face and learned boxing in the unfamiliar Qingming world. This is a well-deserved big shot. Even if he is said to be the #1 martial artist in the world and the entire human world, there is no objection. First, the last priest of the Sword Qi Great Wall, the Yan Kingdom. After that came Xie Xinan, the king of Liju Cave. Now he is the #1 martial artist in the world of Qingming Yashan Lin Jiangxian. Zheng Dafeng has stayed in Feishing City for several years and is very familiar with the customs there. In addition, he and Miss Nian Xian often flirted with each other, and their relationship became very good. He also knew all the stories about the Sword Qi Great Wall. Compared with the famous Summer Palace, the Cold Palace is a bit unsightly. It is similar to the vassal of the former. The two have the meaning of the Empress of the Palace and the concubine of the Cold Palace. The outside world will directly link the Summer Palace to the Yingguan. Whenever one of the titles is mentioned, the other one will naturally come to mind. However, in the hands of the two Yingguan, Shao Sun and Qin Pingan, they have indeed pushed the Summer Palace to a very high level. The location made the Qi practitioners from Manhuang and Haoran have deep memories of this place name. Nowadays, the Tibetan Han Palace in Feishing City has been transferred to the hands of the criminal officials Qi Shou and Yan Xian, who are responsible for the affairs, and has become the government office of the criminal swordsman and the martial arts performance ground of the warriors. But in fact, hiding Han Palace was the exclusive territory of the priest's lineage a long time ago. It's just that the Sword Qi Great Wall's files deliberately avoided talking about it. One to escape the heat and the other to escape the cold. To escape the cold? What are you hiding from? Why hide? Could it be that the two palaces of the Sword Qi Great Wall have their own origins with the fire god and water god of the fifth high school in the ancient heaven? Qin Pingan once asked the boss Jianxian a series of questions, but the boss asked him to ask the priest, saying that the priest was in charge of this area, and he knew better that these old Huangli were too rough to wipe their butts. Qin Pingan had no choice but to ask the priest what his life experience was besides the name on the secret file, why the record was erased, and where this person was currently. The boss sword immortal said you can ask the previous Yingguan. I remember that the braided man seemed to get along well with the priest, and they had a good relationship. Qin Pingan was so angry that he itched his teeth and said, "You want me to ask Shao Sun, who is already in the 14th realm, face to face? Should I run away after asking or should I die after asking?" The boss Jianxian patted the new Yingguan on the shoulder and sighed, "So, you can't just be taller than Shao Sun. It doesn't work. When your realm is equal to hers, you can ask and you can run away after asking. If you want to chat a few more words, just chat a few more words." The barrier set up in Liju Cave was originally created by Cui Han. Qin Pingan already knew that the current manager was still Lin Jingqing. As for the previous manager, there was no record and he did nothing. It seemed that his senior brother Cui Chang was not satisfied with his actions, so he replaced him with Lin Jingqing, who worked in the kiln supervision and construction department. Is the foreigner whose pseudonym is Xie Xinan. This person is nominally a disciple of Old Man Yang, and his identity is equivalent to that of Li Er and Zheng Dafeng later. As the last priest of the Sword Qi Great Wall, Xie Xinan quietly left his hometown. Hanging Mountain was the only way to go. Later he met Zhang Qiaoxia, who was the #1 martial artist in Haoran in the past, on the sea. They had a fight and just exchanged ideas. After that, they landed in Tongyi's Hao and found Qing Tong from the demon-suppressing tower. According to the inside story, Qing Tong leaked to Xiao Mo, the two sides broke up on bad terms. Then go to Aquarius continent and secretly enter Liju cave. The disciples taught by old man Yang of the medicine shop are all martial artists without exception. From Xie to Li Er, Zheng Dafeng and finally to Su Dian and Shi Lingshan. Of course, there must have been some senior brothers and sisters before Xie, but after all, the lifespan of a pure martial artist is not as good as that of a qi practitioner. Unless there are exceptions like Xie, I think they have all been wiped out. In the history of the Sword Qi Great Wall, the last martial artist at the end was by Lian Shuang, the old nanny of the Ning Mansion. According to the archival records of the Yingguan lineage going back even further, it turns out that the last Jijia martial artist was hundreds of years old, and she was still a female master. Even if we keep turning the pages forward in the long history of the Sword Qi Great Wall, the number of martial arts masters who can reach the top of the mountain and reach the end is still pitifully small. The reason why it was so abnormal was naturally that the Sword Qi Great Wall had already planned to build embankments to intercept the flow, and accumulated great accumulation to allow someone to monopolize the military fortune. This person is the last priest whose surname is Yan Minghua. His real name is Yenghua. Chen Pingan once saw an annotation in a secret file that was obviously written by Xiao Min, the physical body of every pure warrior is a pantheon of incense. Thousands of years ago, the first ancestor of the military strategist single-handedly pioneered martial arts and created a new world for the world. Unfortunately, he reached the top but failed to reach heaven and became a 15th-level monk like the founder of the three religions. It is said that precisely because he was blessed with martial arts, this path was different from Shinto. If it is too close, it becomes a burden that cannot be thrown away. Unless he dissipates all his luck, he will have a chance. It was just that the battle to reach the sky was about to come, so he threatened to talk about it later. The war was imminent and it would be good to have more killing power. As for what happened later, it was the internal strife that almost caused chaos in the world again. He was beheaded and imprisoned in the sky for thousands of years. Back then, Qin Pingan also asked the boss Jianxian a crucial question. Why Ningya was so seriously injured in the small town? Chen Qingda's answer at the time was rather perfunctory. He only said that someone had made a fortune telling that Ningyata should suffer this disaster, and the sooner the better. Don't be afraid of bad things early, but they will be easy to deal with. Zheng Dafeng straightened up and focused his gaze on a mountain. Not far from the north of Luolu Mountain, there is a medium-sized hilltop. There is no owner practicing Taoism there, so it is so deserted. I remember Weibo mentioned it once. It seemed that there had been some construction projects on that mountain before, but they were just careless and pretentious, and then abandoned halfway. Further north is the Hon Kim Lake formed by the Longquan sword sect's relocation of all the peaks. The mountain and the water seemed a little lonely, and they were silent for a long time. Zheng Dafeng thought for a while. That lonely mountain top seems to be called Jinran Mountain. Love between men and women is actually similar to cultivating Taoism. If the mountain is not mine, I will be the mountain. Is probably wishful thinking and unrequited love. Even if you get closer, you can only look at the mountain from the foot of the mountain. Zheng Dafeng went to the back mountain, and then Qin Lingjun took Qingjia to the top of the mountain, planning to visit here first and then take her to Jisa Peak. Qingjia looked at the building on the top of the mountain and asked doubtfully, "Where is this place?" It turns out that there is no plaque hanging here, but there is a long couplet hanging here. It doesn't look like a fairy mansion but more like an ancestral temple? Why was it hung here earlier? Why not withdraw it now? Qin Lingjun explained with a smile, "There used to be a mountain temple here and this is the old site. Later the mountain changed the place and moved to Chiduan Mountain. The road we took up the mountain just now was actually an incense-burning shrine. My master liked it very much. This couplet has been left, and according to local customs, it can be called Yu-Zu. Although it looks a bit strange and does not match, my husband believes in this and it is not just for show." Qingjia suddenly realized, no wonder. She looked at the couplet a few more times and silently wrote down the content. "The world whispers and the sky hears thunder. Although our ancestors are far away, we offer sacrifices to I Ching. Don't worry about who I was in the last life. You need to pay attention to this life. My destiny is my own. It will be here for eternity. The dark room is dark and the eyes are like lightning. Although my descendants are stupid, they should read poems and books. I don't care who I am in the next life. Don't underestimate this body. Seek your own blessings. 3 talents are here and 6 feet away." Qin Lingjun didn't urge her to move. "We in Luapa Mountain are full of knowledge. We are the ones who know and cherish blessings the most when we are surrounded by blessings." On the way to Luolu Mountain, no matter how hard Qingjia, who was in the immortal state, tried his best to see the mountain, he could only see the mountain from outside the mountain. The clouds covered the mountain and the fog surrounded it, making it difficult to see clearly. After passing the archway at the foot of the mountain and actually entering the mountain, I realized that there was indeed a different cave. In addition, Qingjia's spiritual consciousness was sharp, which was different from that of ordinary Taoists. He only mentioned the continuous heavy rain that refused to stop, and Qingjia could see more. There are many ways and she has obtained a piece of Tao Yun, but she has not been able to truly refine it so far. Qingjia knows that this matter is not trivial, but it is a pity that she is allowed to use her magical powers in various ways, and even specially chooses one on the spot. In a place with clean mountains and rivers, I tried to form a formation to receive rainwater, and wanted to harvest more through this, but I still couldn't get more gifts from heaven. Qingjia knew that this matter could not be obtained by external force, so she had to give up. Before setting off, she did not remove the landscape formation. Instead, she left a sum of fairy money and allowed it to continue to operate without stopping, with some genius. The loss of earthly treasures is not worth mentioning, just leave it to those who are destined to go to the mountain to get this beautiful place. Qingjia came to this Luoluo mountain. Although she was a little disappointed at the foot of the mountain, when she climbed up the mountain she became more and more sure that the mountain was hiding a great formation, which was very mysterious. Even if there was no one in the mountain, she would still be better than climbing if she wanted to sneak in. It's still difficult. Qingjia had already noticed at a glance that the kid in green clothes named Jingqing next to him had a water snake at his feet. Thanks to his ability to walk through water, he had the perfect appearance of Yuanying now. Chen Lingjun took her to the Jisa Peak Patriarch Hall. The two of them browsed and chatted. The scenery they saw along the way made her feel relaxed and happy. The sky was bright, the ground was warm and dense, the smoke and clouds filled the rock walls, and the pines and cypresses arched out of the landscape house. It was indeed a blessing. Miraculous, not artificially chiseled. In addition, there are many pavilions on the mountain roads for people to rest and enjoy the scenery. Every few miles there is a pavilion. They have wonderful names and are quite impressive. I think it was the handiwork of Chen Yingguan. It is only said that the Chan-biting pavilion they are currently standing on has a wide view, just like the mountain gods helping each other, sweeping away the peaks and clouds for people, and they can see a mountain range in the distance. Following Qingjia's line of sight, Chen Lingjun introduced that it is called Chiduan Mountain, the place where my good friend Wei Shenjun became enlightened. For the wise people who have mastered the magical power of Shuqi, Piyun Mountain is very close. If Qingjia had not been hindered by his own background, he really wanted to go to Piyun Mountain, hide his identity, and participate in a famous event. Night Party. The path of incense and the divine way is indeed easier to achieve immortality than refining qi and cultivating the truth. Qingjia couldn't help but sigh quietly. On the way to a higher level as a qi practitioner, no matter how strong your heart is in asking questions, you will inevitably sigh a little, lamenting the hard-earned achievements of your current cultivation, and melancholy about the future path. Rugged and difficult to navigate. In the 13 realms under the Hadao, one mountain opens out a mountain barrier. The realms are passes, and there are tens of thousands of mountains outside the mountains. Different from the ordinary wild monsters, Qingjia has been admiring and fascinated by Haoran Tianxia since he was a child. Of course, if Mr. Zheng hadn't come to Jinsui City, Qingjia would not have become a traitor and left the wilderness to seek refuge in Baidi City. There is no limit to the sea of learning, but there is no limit to my life. Ability is limited, desires are endless. The skin-shaped body of a human being is a precious raft for cultivating Taoism and becoming an immortal. Otherwise, why would the monsters and spirits in the world work so hard to become human beings? This is the result of being disbanded on the spot, obediently returning one's Taoism to heaven and earth. In so many unknown caves, there are so many qi practitioners with great perseverance, great opportunities and great luck, but now they are all dead bones. No matter how you say it, it is better than the best. Look at the world outside the mountains. How many people are young after thousands of years? The same poor people have been the same for hundreds of years. Isn't it even more sad? Qingjia's thoughts wandered thousands of miles. At the beginning of the melting of heaven and earth, the vitality is weakening. Reminiscing about the ancient style is so elusive. Hearing the sound of rustling footsteps in the distance, Qingjia immediately put away the scattered thoughts that were as numerous as weeds and calmed down. She didn't want to show the slightest bit of cultivation here, so she didn't use any technique similar to Buddhist clairvoyance. She just turned her head and looked around. There was a strange little the mountain road, holding a bamboo stick and carrying a shoulder bag. Qingjia looked at it. Look again, you can never be sure of the true state of the person coming. Seeing that the Taoist fellow from Xuanhu showed no sign of moving for a while, Qin Lingjun simply sat cross-legged on the bench with his hands on his chin, happily taking a break from the busy work. When it comes to showing up to entertain male monks, there is nothing wrong with it, and there is no shirking the responsibility. But for women, Qin Lingjun is not Jing Dafeng, let alone an old cook, so it is really not a big or small chore. I recall those days when I was there in Yujiang. Although I was full of friends and happy all day long, I didn't know the least about the worldly customs on the mountain. Welcomes and farewells were either grudges or business. Not to mention those old nascent soul immortals whose names are only heard but whose form is not seen. Even a golden elixir can be said to cover the sky with one hand. As the host, Brother Yujiang Water God, he is here. Before opening the mansion, it was because of some hidden encounters in the mountains in his early years and the twists and turns of the connection with the Xingao sect that he met a disciple of the Izhou Dao master, Qi Xinjuan, who held the blessed land. To help him, Yujiang bestowed upon him a treasure that was similar to an imperial edict to open the palace, and this led to the later splendor of the Qingjian Water Palace, which was arrogant in shape and resembled a dragon palace on land. There was no reason to think of a female Qi practitioner in Qingjian Water Mansion. Her origin was unknown. Her appearance was not bad, but her color was not very beautiful. Although she was not a peerless beauty, she had the unique charm of a beautiful woman. Of course, Qin Lingjun didn't understand this back then. Are all private remarks made by friends. Some say that she is the forbidden concubine or concubine of the water Kansas. Others say that she is a poor person who came here to take refuge. The family is kind to Yuken and hides in Qingjian Water Mansion. Qin Lingjun only I know that she lived in seclusion all year round, lived frugally, and was stingy to an excessive degree. When it came to her spiritual practice, she really had a determination to pursue the path even if she died in this life. This was probably what is called in the Book of Ghosts and Monsters, dying for the sake of pursuing the path. Unfortunately, her end was not good. I wasn't familiar with her, and I probably hadn't even talked to her for a few words, so Qin Lingjun didn't feel very sad about her ending. He just felt that something should not be like this, but the result was like this. That's it. Qin Lingjun was not sentimental. On the mountain, he would only show some emotions consistent with his appearance when he thought of his old friends on the other side of Yujiang. He murmured, "On the road to practice there are wind and rain, and obstacles are like autumn grass. The achievements are like spring ice. The accumulation is not high. There are many difficulties here, and the word hardship can describe them all." Qingjia was a little surprised when he heard this and sincerely praised, "Good advice, fellow Taoist." Qin Lingjun waved his hands repeatedly and said with a laugh, "I once say that these are formalities. I heard them from Brother Dafeng. I just borrowed them." Qingjia was obviously doubtful. Qin Lingjun grinned and said, "He becomes a fool whenever he meets a good-looking woman, but he is actually a very smart person." Qingjia declined to comment. Before coming to Luapa Mountain to recognize his ancestors, Qingjia did some solid homework. Leaving aside the fact that the mountain master Qin Pingan is the hidden official, the Qi practitioners in Howren's world definitely don't know more inside information than she does in the wilderness. The most regrettable thing is that there are too few reports about the mountains and rivers of Lualu Mountain. When Qingjia arrived at the boundary of Aquarius Continent, she wanted to get some paper content at the Mountain Ferry or the Xinjia Inn, but she never expected that she would never find it. Qi practitioners occasionally mentioned it, and it was mostly gossip. Qingjia knew as soon as she heard it that it was nonsense and not illegal. After she inquired a little more, she found out the reason. It turned out that before the rise of Luoluo Mountain, it's just an inconspicuous little sect on a small mountain. At most, it is regarded as a vassal of Piyun Mountain, helping Lord Wei Shan of Dali to launder some shady money into clean silver for Beiyu's treasury, so it is not worthy of the mountain's official report. How to spend pen and ink? It is not appropriate for the Immortal Mansion to investigate deeply. After all, there are too many investigations. If something goes wrong, the person who is really being talked about has no intention of listening, and the person who has good intentions will find some conclusive evidence, and then be reported to a certain company in Pyanshan. If the chief official goddess showed it to Mr. Wei Shan, wouldn't she be upset and talk about it in vain? In this way it would be like quarreling with a northern mountain. When the time comes, Piyun Mountain will bear the grudge and reciprocate the courtesy, directly sending an invitation letter to the night banquet to his door. To go or not to go. Not going would be a slap in the face to Mr. Wei Shan. If he goes, how should he prepare the congratulatory gifts? Who doesn't know that the roll call at the foot of Beiwei is unique? How many sects of the immortal family came to the door with gifts to congratulate, but they suffered a lot here, just because they underestimated the lavishness of their peers, and had to temporarily increase the weight of the gifts. Those at the front of the team are not individuals, and like to embarrass themselves and make themselves fat. Don't you? If it makes me feel better, then I will pay for it out of my own pocket first, then report it to the sect later, and raise the predetermined gift to a higher standard so as not to make it easier for those who follow. When the young Yin official quietly returned to his hometown from the Jiangxi Great Wall, and then he led the team to inquire about Jianjingyang Mountain, it happened to be at the stage when the Confucian Temple banned Howren's report. It was obvious that the Confucian Temple had been instructed to suppress the news. I don't want Luo Luoshan and Qin Pingan to be too famous, and there is a tacit understanding between the Chinese Confucian Temple and the Great Li dynasty. No wonder it is difficult to find a tofu-sized piece of space in the Xianxia newspaper in Aquarius continent. Nowadays in Aquarius Island, it is recognized that there are 3 odd things and 2 weird things in Luo Luo Mountain. The first one is in a sect's immortal mansion with very few genealogy monks, the second one is in a mountain sect with a lot of martial arts masters, and the third one is in a righteous sect with many mountain spirits. One of the strange things is that the latecomers of Luapa Mountain can actually allow Ruan Qiong, who was the first to determine the identity of the sect, to force the Longquan sword sect out of the old Li Zhudong world and have to move to the north. You need to know that Ruan Qiong is a member of the Great Li dynasty. The chief minister never thought about making room for Luo Luoshan. As the sun is rising in Luolu Mountain, it is unstoppable as can be imagined. I think it's because when Qin Jianxian was young and down to earth in his hometown, what kind of relationship did he have with Ruan Qiong, who was the last saint of Lizhu Cave Heaven? Now that we meet again on the road or in the imperial palace of Lijing City, does sect master Ruan need to give way to Qin Jianxian? There is another strange thing, that is, the person who protects and worships the mountain in Luapa Mountain. Now the outside world only knows that his surname is Zhou. He has a great background and his realm is immeasurably high. It is only said that during her visit to Xingyang Mountain, she deliberately suppressed her realm to the extremely low level of Dongfu from beginning to end. She was the only monk who was so ignorant of the Xingyang Mountain sword immortal. Not to mention Xingyang Mountain, which has a swordmaster like a cloud, it is not worthy of her taking action at all, and it is not even worthy of her showing the slightest bit of Taoism. Despite her skinny appearance as a little girl in black, she must have a profound Taoist practice, rejuvenating her youth, and her cultivation is bottomless. Occasionally I have some objections, wondering if there is a possibility that the state enshrined in that week is actually the state that everyone sees. However, news soon came out that proved the absurdity of this statement and completely dispelled the doubts and disputes. These news were first transmitted from the main city of Jiangxi Great Wall to the Mirage in the north in the early years, and then passed through the upside-down mountain to the cross-continental ferries of the old Dragon City. They traveled all the way to Aquarius continent. The monks from Yizhou later realized that in this matter, Qin Jianxian became the last hidden official of the Great Sword Qi Wall. It turned out that Zhou Chongfeng was a well-known figure in the Great Sword Qi Wall and was often mentioned by the locals. The sword cultivator mentioned that he was respectfully called the Big Water Monster of Dumb Lake. Where is the Great Wall of Sword Qi? The local sword cultivators there are so high-minded that they can't even look down on the entire world. How can they look down on a few outsiders? What's more, if the genus of spirits want to gain a foothold in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, there is a reason. If I remember correctly, isn't there only the old deaf boy who is the #1 great swordsman? It was indeed a great opportunity. Before Qin Jianxian became successful at that young age, he was able to invite such a fierce general from Beiju Luzhou to sit on the top of the mountain and protect the mountains and rivers. Qingjia asked from the bottom of his heart, "Fellow Taoist Jingqing, could this be your Luolu Mountain's Zhou Zongfang?" Qin Lingjun stretched out his hand to greet Xiao Mili and said with a heartfelt smile, "Yes, her name is Zhou Mili and she is patrolling the mountain. In our family she has the highest official rank. There is something about our mountain master's 2 senior brothers. Everyone has to listen to her. The official authority of our Zhou Dharma protector is very great." The speaker has no intention and the listener has intention. Qingjia was shocked. 2 senior brothers? There are only a few direct disciples of Wensheng, and those senior brothers of the young Yingguan, you can pick 2 at random. Chuichan left and right, Lu Shilu Qi Jingchen. Qingjia had originally concluded that this water monster, contrary to the rumors spread by the outside world, was actually in the cave realm, which was absolutely true. Now she didn't dare to make any judgments. The little girl in black, who was jumping up and down, first saw Jing Qing's waving hand, and then saw the strange woman in a simple and elegant dress. He quickly held his breath and concentrated, walked seriously and quickly came to the pavilion. At the same time he embraced the green bamboo staff and the golden pole and saluted, "I have met the immortal master." I'm glad to meet you. Generally speaking, if you can go up the mountain, you are not considered an outsider. Qingjia returned the courtesy and said, Jing Qingjia of Jingqueching, I have the honor to meet Zhou Chongfeng. The little girl in black nodded. She was not good at polite greetings with strangers, so she suddenly became cold-hearted. Qingjia was the first to speak with a smile. In the past, in the wild Jinsui city, I heard about Shanzhu Chen's wine shop and the name of Mute Lake Wine. The little girl was timid and asked tentatively, Seriously? Qingjia smiled and said, There are absolutely no lies. The millet grains suddenly became excited. The reputation spreads far and wide, ha. A household name, ha. The big water monster of Dumb Lake is not very tall but famous. It is famous all over the world and there is more than one oh. As for realm and all, it's all misunderstanding, hey small misunderstanding, hee hee. Qingjia was still speculating on the true Taoism of the little girl in front of him. Could it be that she was really the kind of Tao Dao Jinren, who had returned to her original nature and had what the Taoist books call an innocent heart? She was originally on a mountain patrol, so she was happy to accompany Jing Qing and Xuanhu Immortal to take another trip to Jisa Peak. Qingjia looked at the little girl, leading the way and shook his head. There were dragons and crouching tigers hidden in the poor mountain. It was not surprising, so he didn't want to guess the cultivation level of the mountain protector. Qin Lingjun suddenly pointed to the cliff carving on the roadside. Fellow Xuanhu Taoist, what do you think of these words? Qingjia took a look at it, nodded in appreciation and said, It is a first-class cursive calligraphy with extremely good skills, like a strong man drawing a sword, his spirit is flying. Qin Lingjun had already prepared the draft and immediately added, It was carved by Zheng Dafeng. Even my mountain master said that he is not weak in academics and has the skills of a boy. Brother Gale, I can only help you so much. It is said that a woman can only hide her ugliness, but a poor man can only hide his ugliness. Qingjia had been holding a question in her heart for a long time, and she couldn't figure it out. She had asked Mr. Zheng before, but Mr. Zheng seemed to know the answer, but deliberately didn't tell her, and asked her to ask the master again when she got to Luolu Mountain. This doubt is why Qin Pingan chose Luolo Mountain as the dojo and the basis for establishing the sect, Luolo? That's not a good way to say it. People at the bottom of the mountain pay attention to auspicious words, but people at the top of the mountain are more taboo. Regarding this matter, even the monks in the hometown of the wild world have a lot of speculations and quarrels, but there is no conclusion. Qingjia hesitated. I have a question, I don't know if it's appropriate to ask. She immediately laughed at herself, thinking that she had really met the young hermit official, and no matter how curious she was, she didn't dare to ask him face to face. Xiaomili scratched her face and frowned at Jingqing. Jingqing, you answer. Qin Lingjun has always been a big-hearted person, and he laughed and said, Just ask, fellow Taoist, I will definitely tell you everything I know. Outside the mountains, I might be a little more cautious, but in the mountains, on my own territory with the support of the mountain owner, I am full of courage. Qingjia asked, This mountain has a poor name. Does it hide the knowledge of the university? As a result, Qin Lingjun was blinded as soon as he heard this. Taoist fellow Xuanhu asked such a tricky question. He had never thought about such a close question. He coughed a few times, hinting to Xiaomili, You and the mountain master talk about everything. Do you have a ready answer? Xiaomili and Qin Lingjun had a tacit understanding. They immediately turned around and said with a smile, Before coming to Luopa Mountain, I asked the good mountain owner. He said that Luopa Mountain was an ancient name in the county chronicle of his hometown. He chose the top of the mountain and personally I went into the mountain to inspect it and saw that it looked promising, so I spent money to buy it. The good mountain owner didn't think much about it at that time. In fact, Qin Pingan told her more, including some secrets that were not known to outsiders. Xiaomi was not good at pouring beans through a bamboo tube. He only said 3 sentences to everyone so he couldn't give up everything. Qingjia nodded and stopped asking. After thinking about it, he couldn't help but ask again, 2 fellow Taoists, this is a rare opportunity. I have another question. I don't want to say it out loud. As we all know, there are 3 souls and 7 souls in the human body. How are the sages recorded in ancient books that human essence is the life soul, and the body is called soul? Taoists also say that the soul is the yang god, and the soul is the yin god. However, since ancient times, the spiritual book Secrets of Refining Qi and Cultivating Immortals, as well as the practice of our monks however, the golden core realm allows the yin god to travel far away from the body, while the nascent soul realm creates an outer body of the yang god. The former is virtual, like a soul traveling between heaven and earth, while the latter is real and more consistent with the body. In this way, is it different from the yang soul and the yin soul? Dare I ask these two fellow Taoists, how do you explain this truth? Is the ancient book wrong, or have we gone astray in our Taoism? The little girl leading the way walked faster. The boy in green didn't flutter his sleeves. He had to bring in reinforcements. He first called out to Brother Dafeng with his heart, saying that the opportunity has come. That fellow Xuanhu Taoist asked a good question. Please run over and help answer it. I can't help but look at you with admiration. Zheng Dafeng ignored him. Chen Lingjun could only recite Wei Bo's godly name Yao repeatedly in his heart. Wei Bo asked what was it? Chen Lingjun quickly explained the situation, and Wei Bo rewarded him with the word, go. Chen Lingjun had no choice but to continue shouting at Zheng Dafeng from the bottom of his heart. If he didn't come to the rescue, the brothers would do whatever they wanted in the future. Zheng Dafeng, who was busy giving boxing tips to the young girl Chao Yang on the back mountain, had no choice but to say goodbye. He rose up in the wind and landed on the mountain road in an instant. His figure was elegant, and when his feet touched the ground, the man trembled slightly. Sleeves, smiling face to face with Xianxia. Putting aside his appearance and temperament, he does have the demeanor of a master. Zheng Dafeng gathered their voices together and complained to Chen Lingjun, it's not like you don't understand. I'm used to living on my reputation, and mystical studies are not my specialty. Chen Lingjun rolled his eyes and said, stop talking nonsense and get down to business. Don't let outsiders think that we are uneducated. Zheng Dafeng felt helpless and had to ask Xianxia to repeat the question. After listening to it, he breathed a sigh of relief and shocked me. It turned out to be a question asked by a young boy in a school. Damn it, I thought Sister Xuanhu was going to ask how to reach the sky in one step and soar in the daytime. However, Zheng Dafeng had to deliberately pretend to be deep in thought, and then he answered with a smile. The Li Sheng created the word, but he personally interpreted the word and defined it, but there were not many. If I remember correctly, one of them included the sentence the soul, the prosperity of ghosts. It is necessary to know the earliest ancient seal script with the word Hun. The word Hun means ghosts above the clouds and below, and the word Pi means ghosts on the left and white on the right. To explain why it seems to be contrary to the tenets of Taoism, the yin and yang are just interconnected with each other. Qi refiners, also known as Taoist priests in ancient times, do what they do, which is to swim against the current, steal yin and yang, seize creation, turn the heavens and the earth's axis, and use this to become a saint, become an immortal, and become an ancestor. Xianxia seemed to have some enlightenment after hearing the words. Zheng Dafeng smiled and said, how about a few more digressions? Xianxia said seriously, I would like to hear the details and listen attentively. Zheng Dafeng walked side by side with her and said with a smile, 10,000 years ago in ancient times, the battle to reach the sky broke through the heaven, and the divine way collapsed. After that, the world was settled, and the three religions and hundreds of schools of thought, which were originally only in their rudiments, were with rapid development. Those immortals and talents with destiny and luck will be saved after hearing the Tao, and they will ascend to heaven and earth. They will open up and find the blessed land of heaven and earth. They will be free and at ease and want to be with heaven and earth. Secondly, they will have longevity and achieve the realm of real people on land. Stay in the human world. You can feel happy again for a moment, the soul is finally separated, and the boundaries between yin and yang are unclear. 7,000 years ago was the ancient times, and the remnants of a group of ancient gods survived, occupying part of the old thrones, each performing their own duties, and the priesthood had slightly less authority, it was just reduced, but the dragon was still responsible for making clouds and rain. City god temples began to appear in the world, as well as new gods canonized by the imperial court, which were orthodox, and numerous prostitution temples from all over the world, sharing the incense in the world, lest the old gods hide in them and take the opportunity to resurrect. Jane, in short, the purpose of consecrating the gods is to distract the mind. Year after year, bidding farewell to the old and welcoming the new, the establishment of the tradition of beating the spring drum every year in the Chinese Confucian temple is actually a declaration to the heaven and the earth, to the outside world. 5,000 years ago was the Middle Ages, and 3,000 years ago was marked by the Battle of Dragon Slaying. Today, it is generally regarded as modern times by the Qi practitioners on the mountain. Now this reign, you and I, are just in time, and it is estimated that it will happen again. A new turning point. As for how future generations will decide, we have to wait for another 1,000 years. In addition to the creation of characters and rituals thousands of years ago, the ritual sage has unparalleled knowledge of heaven and earth. About 8,000 years ago, he also worked with experts to formulate more detailed rules. How many people in the world follow the ancient rituals established by the ritual sage to build temples? The temple worships the god, compiles family trees and offers incense. The 3 souls and 7 souls of human beings are linked to life and death. When people are alive and live in the world of the sun, the soul is one, and the body and soul are in harmony. After death, the soul ascends to heaven, and the soul body falls to the earth, where the spirit resides. In the temple, the body is buried in its own place. The soul will be enshrined forever because it belongs to the ancestral temple, and will not wander around and become a lonely ghost. The soul will disappear with the decay of the corpse, and the bones, flesh and form will return to the earth. It is destiny. When you are buried, you must cry 3 times and say a word to seal the coffin before the coffin is sealed. Therefore, in addition to the number of souls, they have different destinations, but they still have priorities. The soul ascends to heaven and the soul lives underground. Of course, the founders of the 3 religions are powerful, but I only admire the Li Shen. Qin Lingjun was shocked when he heard this. He was indeed right about Brother Dafeng. There was something about him. Even if it's just nonsense, if you can compile so much at once without taking a breath, that's pretty smart, right? But when Qin Lingjun heard those last words, he quickly kicked Zheng Dafeng secretly. You speak more leisurely, don't be so insignificant. Qingjia stopped, turned sideways, bowed his head to the man and said solemnly, Thank you, Mr. Guo, for your teaching. It's like seeing the sun after clearing the clouds, and I suddenly became enlightened. Zheng Dafeng quickly dodged away and said with a smile, It's just a few casual remarks about Xiantian. I can't deserve this great gift from fellow Taoist Xuanhu. Qingjia was full of energy, more colorful and more beautiful. It was really thrilling. Can you go to the husband's house later to disturb me? Zheng Dafeng shook his head, smiled and patted his belly. My academic ability is meager and I have no time left. If we continue to talk, we will show our timidity. Without further explanation, Zheng Dafeng had already left Yufeng. Qingjia still wanted to stay, so she reached out her arms, but hesitated for a moment and gave up. An expert outside the world is nothing more than this. But the man who traveled far and wide in a carefree way was still secretly chuckling. This skill of playing hard to get, and his proficiency in it, is really amazing. How could he tell that the sister was not firm enough in asking questions? Standing where she was, she just sighed and gave up. When Zheng Dafeng arrived at the gate of the mountain, he didn't care to talk to the Xianwei. He ran to the house to tidy up the bedding and shook the foot of the bed. It was very firm and would definitely not creak. The Xianwei was a little curious and walked to the house. Zheng Dafeng wiped his mouth and shouted with flying steps, "I'll help guard the door. Just rest." The Xianwei didn't know what was going on, but he was just happy to take some time off, so he went to his room. The plaque on the study room in the study room was written by Zheng Dafeng. The old cook helped make the plaque, and it was called xuanhuan. A large gold-lacquered ancient seal character. Style. It's real gold paint. In fact, Xianwei also has several alternative study names, such as reading the unseen study, or rereading the reviewed study. In life, if you want to be pleasant to the eyes and enjoy happiness, it is nothing more than reading new books and seeing old people again. But after thinking about it, Xianwei still felt that a person should not forget his roots. This Taoist slogan has been with him for many years. Hanging there, it is a reminder of the hardships he has suffered. Xianwei entered the study and took out the 2 serious books from his sleeves. Almost all the study items on the table were sent by Nuanshu. During the holidays he would add one more, so the little things added up. Sitting on a 4-year-old official's chair, he pulled out a Taoist book from a small mountain of books on his desk. The name was a bit long. It was Jade Purity, Gold and Green Flower Secret Text, Golden Treasure Internal Alchemy Secret. Xianwei has a habit of reading and likes to read prefaces and postscripts. After entering Luapa Mountain, all Taoist secrets that I had never dreamed of before were at my fingertips, but this habit has not changed. The reason is very simple. Except for the beginning and end, I can't understand the middle. Naturally, he recognized all the words, and when they were connected together, Xianwei was confused. He always felt that he couldn't understand it and it was of no use. Not to mention the relatively pragmatic Taoist book in hand, which explained the process in detail. Xianwei read the Xian family's cultivation secrets that marked the passes and cultivation methods one by one, but he still didn't read them. He didn't have any trouble. Instead, he felt sleepy and wanted to take a nap. Xianwei is not angry about this. Xianwei has always known that he is not a real immortal seed. He does not have a Taoist root weapon. It is a fluke that he can practice magic by mistake and become a second-level Qi practitioner. The task of guarding the door is actually just a matter of nodding and taking a seat. When he has free time, Xianwei comes to the study to drink by himself, drink some old wine, have some food and drinks, read books and play chess and score. Even though Taoist Master Xianwei has to guard the door every day, he never fails to do his homework day and night every day. He doesn't dare to be lazy at all, worried about losing his job and wandering around in the world again. It's just that the Xianwei thought that he was limited by his talent, and his progress was slow. He wasn't too impatient before because he knew that Luapa Mountain didn't care about the level of the realm, and it was okay to muddle along. Now he has accepted a disciple and he is still a serious disciple. In addition, Lin Feijing's current level is not low. According to Wei Shanjun, this son has a deep Taoist foundation and a strong immortal bone. He will be a disciple of him and will have great luck. The key point is that the disciple's realm is higher than that of the master. It's so shameful that we, Taoist Master Xianwei, are a little embarrassed. In fact, Wei Ba's statement is a pun. It seems to be a congratulation to Taoist Master Xianwei, but in fact it is to praise Lin Feijing's profound and extraordinary blessings. He was able to worship him as his teacher and became a Taoist priest in the name of Xianwei, the great disciple. But how did the Xianwei know the twists and turns here, and he finally felt a little more confident about the matter of cultivating Taoism, which was originally discouraged. The Taoist priest, who had dreamed almost every day for as long as he could remember, actually stopped dreaming for 9 days in a row. Xianwei didn't pay much attention to this. Living in seclusion in the mountains, shutting up the doors, burning incense late at night, and keeping away the sleeping demons has brought you peace of mind, and supplemented by reading, it is the first good way for scholars of our generation to settle their souls. After reading the Taoist book for a while, yawning and needing to refresh myself, Xianwei changed to a book that could be read by following the folded pages and jumping around. Suddenly, it was like a divine help, killing millions of sleepyheads. Also reading, Wei Bo took a break in his own reading room in Beiyue. The previous night banquet was very busy, so he had to slow down. In the past, I used to try my best to hold night banquets when I encountered unkind people. Whenever I had an excuse, I would hold one. Now that I have a divine title, it's time to come to an end. There is something that needs to be discussed with Chen Pingan at the moment. It turns out that the Dali Imperial Court is about to secretly send a group of Taoist embryos with immortal family roots and good talents who have practiced martial arts since childhood, a total of 16 people. Half of them belong to related households, and are the children of the top powerful families in Dali, or the good seedlings found and cultivated by these families. The other half are swordsmanship geniuses and martial arts wizards carefully selected by Great Li Nianganlang from various countries in the south of Aquarius continent. Moreover, it is said that in another year or two a second batch will be sent, and we will try our best to ensure that all of them are sword cultivators. After being disturbed by Qin Lingjun, Wei Bo put down the book at hand, walked out of the house with bare feet, stood under the eaves, and stretched out his hand to twist the golden earring out of habit. Reminiscing about people looking into the mirror, seeing even more wonders when they are covered with clouds. Zhongyue Jinxing always spoke upright, saying that Wei Ba's Piyun Mountain was very popular, and the reason why it was able to surpass the 5 mountains was because of his face. Wei Bo didn't bother to refute, so he just accepted it as a smile. According to the previous schedule of Fijian's message, those boys and girls will take a military ferry to Nujiadu in 2 days. Chen Pingan has not been in the mountains recently. He may be busy or he may have his own plans anyway. There was no immediate reply to the Ministry of Punishment. The Dali court couldn't help but worry about whether they would be rejected. Don't send the person there, they would have to go back home that day. Even His Majesty the Emperor knew about this, so he asked the Ministry of Rights Yamen after sending a secret letter to Piyun Mountain. Wei Bo had to personally go to the Ministry of Justice office in the capital and asked with a smile, "Is there a third batch?" The other party choked for words. On one continent, on other mountains, no matter whether you are the Xingaozong or the Yunlinjiang family with profound foundations, you are eager for someone to help send these young geniuses to your home. Only Luo Shan really had enough confidence to say that he didn't ask for this. What's more, the news that Qin Pingan is now the new national preceptor is completely unknown to the outside world, and the senior officials of Dali are aware of it. Luapa Mountain's announcement that it would be closed for 20 years was true, but Wei Bo didn't think Qin Pingan would reject these children. A large part of the reason, which is more interesting, is that Qin Pingan, who is the master and the head of the Shangzong, obviously feels the pressure brought by Qingping Sword sect. It can't be that for 20 years, while the lower sect is in full swing and prospering, Luapa Mountain is really closed and has been deserted. Qin Pingan even started to prepare for an important matter, arranging a detailed legal system for Luapa Mountain, and personally reviewing and compiling books, Qi refining Dao books and martial arts secret books. So the only issue that needs to be considered is probably which hilltop to place those children. They will definitely not be placed in a down-and-out mountain like Chaoyin and Chaoyang. There is no doubt about this. Cui Dongshan and Pei Qian bought it not long ago. The nearby Tiaoyu Mountain and Fuyao foothills are very close to Luolu Mountain, and then there is the Huiming Mountain belonging to Yunzi Dojo. All three are close neighbors of the main mountain, so they are relatively suitable. If Qi practitioners and martial artists were deliberately separated, it would be more appropriate to settle in Tiaoyu Mountain and Fuyao Foot respectively. Weibo suddenly cursed a few words. Damn it, this is Luo Luoshan's housework. What should I worry about? Complaints are still complaints, things still have to be done. For example, Lu Yong from Jianghu Palace came all the way. Since Chen Pingan was not in the mountains, he had to take a trip to Luolu Mountain. Because Lu Yong was not an ordinary guest, Chen Pingan was very nostalgic, so Weibo put on his boots first, then stepped out and came to the door of a house and knocked on the door knocker. Lu Yong opened the door and saw Lord Wei Shin coming in person. He hurriedly saluted and congratulated him. Weibo already knew the purpose of Lu Yong's trip and did not beat around the bush. He said with a smile, "To be honest, Mr. Lu doesn't have to go through this trip in person at all. With you guys, the relationship between the two families is not just a casual acquaintance, it is just a good relationship between the two families at the foot of the mountain. In terms of love, Master Lu must come to Luapa Mountain. He really didn't move around much in the past, and it was Master Chen who bothered the Jianghu Palace. He has to come here to let Luapa Mountain show his loyalty as a landlord. As for Zhao Zhu's appointment as the guest minister of Luo Luoshan, he has a chair in the Jisa Peak Ancestral Masters Hall. Master Lu, just take it easy. It's a done deal." Lu Yong had mixed feelings when he heard this. On the one hand, Wei Shinjun never imagined that Wei Shinjun, who had never interacted with him before, would be willing to value himself and Jianghu Palace so much. What was even more unexpected was that Wei Shinjun was an outsider in Luapa Mountain after all, or rather a half-outsider, and he dared to guarantee it like this. Master Qin Shan must have often mentioned Jianghu Palace to Wei Shinjun. Wei Bo smiled and asked, "Did Chen Lingjun mention that this house was specially reserved by Master Chen for Master Lu?" Chen Lingjun didn't say anything, but the old master stroked his beard and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Jingqing has already said it. It's really disrespectful and I deserve it." Wei Bo pointed to the couplet and said with a smile, "It was written by Chen Pingan himself. It's the only copy." The old man looked over there and was stunned for a moment. He was silent for a long time and murmured, "I can't afford it and I deserve it even more. Be generous and righteous, don't stick to trivial matters and gold and silver will come back again. Make friends widely, treat each other honestly, and your character will become more prosperous over time." Wei Bo smiled and said, "I'm going back to Piyun Mountain first. Master Lu is welcome to visit me at any time." Lu Yong then remembered something and took out a congratulatory gift that he had already prepared from his sleeve. It is a great gift for a real person to walk on the ground. Wei Bo stretched out his hand and gently pressed the old man's arm, smiled and shook his head. "Any more is just hypocritical. Why do you only regard Qin Pingan as a friend and not me?" Lu Yong was speechless for a moment, just cupping his fists. Qingjia was about to arrive at a cliffside pavilion on the side of the Jisa Peak Patriarch Hall. Qingjia, who didn't need to rest at all, took the initiative to ask to stay here. The sun and moon are two fireflies and the universe is a magpie's nest. What a beautiful pavilion. Xianwei put down his book, rubbed his eyes and turned to look at the plaque in the study room. "I have read 30,000 scrolls of Taoism, do you know it? After 6,000 years of fame and glory, I am content with my content and my insufficiency." The Xianwei was worried and once asked the mountain owner, "The content of the couplet presented by the mountain owner is so powerful. I am afraid that the poor Taoist is of low level and cannot hold it down. Is it really appropriate?" At that time Qin Pingan smiled and said nothing. The Xianwei refused to accept it, saying that it would be more appropriate to place it in the mountain master's study. Qin Pingan said that it would be more appropriate to put it on your side, and then gave him a Taoist ceremony. The Xianwei was immediately at a loss. After thinking about it, he returned the salute of a scholar. After Qin Pingan left the study, he stepped out of the house gate and went up the mountain with his hands in his sleeves. "What kind of Tao do you want to learn? What kind of practice do you need? What kind of teacher do you need to learn? And what kind of skills do you need to learn? You are the first preacher in the world." Qin Pingan is already considered a courageous person. In the Dali Jingqing Inn, he only dared to bravely dare to take you back to the mountains to learn Taoism and practice together. One day when you think back to your past, you will remember it and go to the mountains to practice Taoism. There are countless green mountains in the world. If anyone dares not to come, just come to you. Sword of Coming Chapter 12:19. Chapter 12:19. Imagination. Chen Pingan changed into a robe. The sky and the earth are covered with snow, and the robes are bright red. The tall trees in the snow are extremely red. High above the city, for some unknown reason, Zhou's figure shrunk to the size of an ordinary person. It wasn't until this moment that Ma Kuxuan knew that he had finally met the rightful owner. He was quite surprised. When did Chen Pingan enter the ancestral hall? He had been sitting at the door before and he didn't notice it at all? Ma Kuxuan believed that he had not underestimated Chen Pingan's moral character, and he did not hesitate to take risks, go against his wishes, and use the thunder magic power that he had hated earlier. But in the end, Chen Pingan just used a clone to deal with him? I originally thought that if he moved out of this meticulously planned move, even if Chen Pingan survived, he would have suffered a loss in his Taoism, and the immortal who had just become an immortal would fall back to Yupu. Ma Kuxuan asked from the bottom of his heart, what happened to the release of Chen Pingan's inner demon? So what if he saw through it? Just strike while the iron is hot. This guy has been fighting for a long time and has a lot of tricks. But if you don't know the way, he will be killed. You fooled it. This is the reason why Ma Kuxuan didn't mind when he was in the big formation before. You Chen Pingan took the lead, but you didn't know that the mantis stalks the cicada and the oriole is behind you. It's not that simple to seize the lead. Logically speaking, the inner demons of a Taoist cultivator are at their peak when they are at the bottleneck of the nascent soul realm and when they are in retreat and want to advance to the upper 5 realms. This is because this is the only way for ancient Taoist priests. If you do not overcome the inner demons and overcome this obstacle, you will not be considered an earthly immortal. As long as he uses Zhou's hand and some long-lost ancient magical power to open the cage of the heart and release Chen Pingan's inner demons, then this formation that isolates the world and helps Chen Pingan gain geographical advantages will become his key to facing the inner demons. The biggest difficulty is that the more spotless the world is here, the more innocent the inner demon's Taoist temple is. The inner demon Chen Pingan faces will be more like Chen Pingan himself. By then, the Taoist will be 1 foot taller and the devil will be taller. When the time comes, Chen Pingan will have to face, in addition to Ma Kuxuan, the fake Zhou who was imagined, plus the inner demon Chen Pingan, they will be 3 immortals. Zhou replied with a smile, it's not that I can't let go, but it's unnecessary. Chen Pingan's inner demon is very weird. For us, it has no killing power and is meaningless. I can't waste my Tao Xing and finally let go of my inner demon. The devil from beginning to end was just watching the show. Ma Kuxuan couldn't help but cursed, I just said this guy is a monster. Zhou said, my existence makes him afraid. It can be seen that my true body makes his memory more profound than ordinary people. Ma Kuxuan said casually, how many people are worthy of Cui Chan and Qi Jingchun joining forces to fight against the enemy? And then they invited the founders of the 3 religions to join forces to suppress them? For thousands of years, there was only one person. Ma Kuxuan waved his hand, and the remnants of the 5 thunders of heavenly tribulation scattered across the heaven and earth would, upon receiving the order, gather at the top of the city, pull up colorful silk threads, and chop up countless snowflakes. Chen Pingan did not stop him and allowed Ma Kuxuan to pick it up. Zhou shook his head, anyway the road is broken. There is no need to take it back. Wait until you win. Be careful. If you are contaminated by the sword's intention, you will lead the wolf into the house. Ma Kuxuan only listened to half of it. He still did not withdraw the decree, but gave up the idea of taking it back into his sleeves. Tens of thousands of colorful threads gathered around Ma Kuxuan's body, condensing into a knot-sized ball. The precious light circulated and shone like a lightning fishing net that covered the sky and the earth. Ma Kuxuan was the person who made the outline. Ordinary people do not know the difference between immortal magic and supernatural powers, and they all regard them as mountain methods. This is because they do not know the difference between gods and immortals. Tracing back to the origin, we can only talk about the roots of the Tao. Strictly speaking, the thousands of spells and tricks of the immortal family are all the lines created by the ancient Qi refiners in their own pursuit of the Tao. In the end, they are always inseparable from collecting Qi, refining Qi, and then using the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Purpose and then manifest it. Miraculous powers are derived from the many powers of ancient gods. Ancient Taoist priests may have carved purple books and recorded those paths in books. This is the origin of some Taoist secrets in later generations. What's more, many magical powers are gathered in the world. The traces of the brand are directly moved and engraved on the Bodis bones, the door of the natal chi palace and the wall, just like a book carved on a cliff or an inscription on the wall. Such ancient immortals and Taoist warriors are reincarnated and born in the future. They inherited part of their predecessors' legacy, which became the foundation for their enlightenment and the opportunity to enter the mountains. This is the reason why later generations pay attention to whether a person has immortal roots and whether he is a Taoist weapon when it comes to mountain climbing and cultivating Taoism to become an immortal. There are also ancient Taoist priests with extraordinary talents who can use it directly. As their Taoism deepens, they can improve it and change its appearance slightly so that they can better adapt to the new world. If we talk about how to display it, we only talk about one kind of magical power, and the will is wonderful in the word tong, magical power, connecting to the gods, a divine way running through heaven and earth. This is also the reason why later Taoists built altars, which imitated the magical power. Taoist priests, you can borrow dharma from the ancestors by granting urns and writing names in immortal books. This method requires paving a road. To take this road, you need to pass the customs ultimatum, hold the token and carry the treasure urn so that it can be smooth. No problem, this is the meaning of Taoist teaching. There is also the branch of incarnation that spreads out from the body, the golden body and the therm-like flow that controls the sky and the earth. They are all taken from the sky by the Qi practitioners and used on the earth. So this is why Zhou said that the road is broken. With Ma Kuxuan now in the immortal realm, he cannot build a second bridge in a short time. What's more, when Ma Kuxuan and Lei Bu borrowed this heavenly tribulation thunder pond, they were already suspected of being a thief. It was already an act of transgression, and they would definitely be held accountable later. Now that they have created such a mess, it is because Ma Kuxuan regarded Qin Pingan as this is the price that must be paid for being an imaginary enemy in the immortal realm. Fortunately, he has always been the kind of person who does things based on his mood and preference, ignoring his body and mind. Ma Kuxuan asked in his heart, "How is the progress of dismantling the formation?" Zhou said calmly, "It's very slow, far lower than expected. His flying sword rank is not low. Moreover, we must avoid alerting the enemy." Ma Kuxuan said helplessly, "I have been repeatedly taught by this guy to fight. It's best not to make any noise. Of course you don't care. No matter how thick-skinned I am, I can't get enough." Zhou turned a deaf ear, holding one hand behind his back and making a fist across his abdomen with the other. He held 2 chess pieces in his palms and rubbed them gently, making a creaking sound. He was not staring at Qin Pingan but staring at that piece of skin which has now transformed into a piece of immortality. It is destined to be a robe that has never been seen before or since. An immortal weapon that carries the true name of the demon clan is indeed very interesting. Even if Qin Pingan gave it to an Ascension Realm monk, he would not dare to wear it. Zhou seemed to be explaining to Ma Kuxuan the origin of Qin Pingan's true form. There are only 2 possibilities for this kind of instant formation to be able to hide from you. 1. He is killing the culprit, destroying Toyua Mountain and the city. Carving words on his head. After returning to Howren, he actually did not return Lu Chen's cultivation level. He always stayed in the 14th pseudo realm and the higher realm. What he borrowed was Lu Chen's miscellaneous Taoist techniques. He borrowed them and used them. He naturally picked them up at his fingertips and he didn't know the ghost. I don't realize it. 2nd, Fijian's natal magical power can not only isolate the world, but also start anew and recreate the world as he pleases. Xianxia, is there anything wrong? Qin Pingan smiled and stretched out an arm, spreading his palm, indicating to continue. For a Taoist cultivator, it is not a pleasant feeling to be beheaded with 3 flowers on your head and have your merits forcibly dispersed by external force. Qin Pingan was forced to kill each other with one hand in order to get out of trouble. He really needed to rest his mind for a while. Fortunately, the beheaded things do not flow to outsiders. They are still scattered in this caged bird anyway, and they can be taken back sooner or later. You must give a level assessment, which is roughly equivalent to receiving half a punch from an 11th level warrior. Ma Kuxuan wanted to help Na Zhou delay time so that he could break the barrier between heaven and earth. Qin Pingan also needed to change a breath of pure qi, and secretly change some layouts temporarily to get what they needed. In this fight where no one knows the details of the other side at the moment, both sides cannot make a wrong move. Everyone wants to get rid of the other. Ma Kuxuan doesn't want to follow a magical path, and Qin Pingan certainly doesn't accept the situation. But both sides have an intuition that at a certain moment, just one move can determine life or death. Or it's Ma Kuxuan's magical power or Qin Pingan's fist or sword. Zhou said, In this way he has at least 2 natal flying swords which unite the world, build a framework, set boundaries and invite you to enter the urn. Whether the host invites you to drink a fine wine or a toast depends on your mood. All things together rely on a golden spirit. The long river of time created by copper coins was allowed to be freely arranged on both sides of the bank. The 2 flying swords and 2 magical powers were matched perfectly. It was equivalent to the saints of the 3 religions carrying around a dojo that could not be moved. Comparing the two, those who are slightly inferior cannot advance to a higher realm. The advantage is that it has existed in this realm throughout the past and present, from all directions. Ma Xuanhuan felt troubled and frowned. Can't it just be a flying sword with several magical powers? Zhoumi smiled knowingly and said, have you forgotten the 10 young people in the world that Zhou raided? Aren't you surprised that only the xianxia and the swordsman Lu Kai who came out of nowhere were deliberately exposed by Zhou? Tell the story of Fijian's name, roots and even the 2 sword-raising gourds owned by Lu Kai? It was clearly Zhou's intention. It was like a letter telling the world. There was no need to hand the letter into someone's hands. Lu Guan is still the only genius to be on the list with the Golden Core realm. On the other hand, the last hidden official Qin Shi, who was at the bottom, only relied on being a nascent Soul Realm sword cultivator and a Yufeng realm martial artist at the same time. If I'm not wrong, when Yang's flying sword by Luo and Yang sword gourd's heart suddenly hit Qiong by Luo with 1 sword strike. It must have been Qin Jiangxian's sword that he was deliberately targeting. Zhoumi raised his hand and rolled up his sleeves. This is a vast world. As long as the sky is high and the yin and yang are in harmony, the avenue will circulate in an orderly manner. Sword cultivators can break through 10,000 methods with 1 sword, and Lu Guan can break through 10,000 with 1 sword. The sword, the upper part is poor and the lower part is yellow spring, and the cage and barrier are all empty. Taozu had another sword-raising gourd called Immediate, and Lu Kai used it to refine the sword White Horse, which happened to defeat the long river of time between heaven and earth. In short, 2 swords restrained 2 swords which happened to be extremely difficult. Qin Ping appeased him with a smile and said, it's amazing. Although it's a fake, it's still far from the next level of authenticity, so it's not too clumsy. Ma Xuanhuan said, don't forget that you are the one at the bottom and you can still be so happy. Qin Pingan smiled and said, I am at the bottom of the top 10 young people in the world, so you are the top 10 young people in Aquarius continent. Are you happy? Ma Xuanhuan twitched the corner of his mouth. Qin Pingan said, did Zhou say hello to you in private when he was making the list? You thought you would rather be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix, so you gave me the bottom position? Ma Xuanhuan stretched out his hand and rubbed his cheek, grinned and said, there are times when you cry. Qin Pingan said with a smile, Ma Xuanhuan, you have a bad habit that you brought from your mother's womb, that is, you don't like other people's kindness and you want to overpower others in everything. Furthermore, you only do things that you think you can do well. Kuxian, this is not good, you have to change. Of course, the premise is that you still have a chance to change your ways. Ma Xuanhuan was so disgusted by the words Xuanhuan. Zhoumi took a look at the bright red color in the snow. Ma Xuanhuan sneered and said, the old scholar's archenemy once said that being a teacher is a serious problem for people. I heard that you are not good at reasoning, so why don't you just go to the countryside and become a teacher? Qin Pingan said, I think people have 2 major problems. In addition to being a teacher taught by saints, there is another problem, which is being ashamed to be a disciple. Ma Xuanhuan choked on his words. Qin Pingan took a deep breath. Doesn't it seem impossible to choose to accomplish all the results in one battle? Zhoumi ignored the bickering between the 2 fellow villagers and said to himself, everyone in the world mistakenly thinks that the emergence of Lu Kai from an unknown swordsman to one of the top 10 young people in the world is a coincidence. Born, he followed the trend and gained the favor of heaven and earth. He felt that heaven did not want Ning Yao to be more beautiful than him. Just like among the younger generation, Chao Ci first followed Qin Jianxian on the martial arts path. It seems that the same should be true for swordsmanship. Only then would Lu Kai be compared with Ning Yao. He thought that Lu Kai, who had been practicing swordsmanship for 100 years, would have a chance to compete with Ning Yao at the same level of swordsmanship. Neither of them expected that Lu Kai, a swordsman, would truly the one we have to deal with is not Ning Yao but Qin Jianxian. Ma Xuanhuan's mind was unusual. Instead of rejoicing in his misfortune, he regretted why he didn't have such an old enemy. Of course Qin Pingan can be considered an old enemy, but swordsman Lu Kai is the key winner and loser tailor-made by Zhou for Qin Pingan, which has a different meaning. However, this misjudgment that Lu Kai had the opportunity to compete with Ning Yao in Kendo was indeed reasonable at the time, because many people felt that Feishing City had moved to the colorful world and that it was no longer his luck in kendo. With the strong old sword energy of the Great Wall, it stands to reason that Ning Yao's breakthrough speed may indeed slow down. Every time she advances to a realm, the stagnation period in the next realm will be longer. Then Lu Kai, who holds 2 Daozu sword gourds, has the possibility of catching up. What are the facts? What else could be done? Naturally, it was an afterthought and I misunderstood Ning Yao. It turned out that it made no difference whether she was refining swords at the Great Sword Chi Wall or not. In the previous 10,000 years, the sword cultivators in the world were nothing more than Qin Qingdu and other sword cultivators besides Qin Qingdu. These were the only 2 types. Now Ning Yao has shown signs and momentum of filling Qin Qingdu's vacancy. She just doesn't know if this heavenly barrier from the Ascension realm to the 14th realm of Hadao will stop her. Ma Kuxuan suddenly noticed that Qin Pingan had a strange expression on his face. Why, while we were chatting in a hurry we talked about your Taoist lover Ning Yao, and then we thought that I was a freeloader. Starting to feel uncomfortable? Nowadays almost everyone in the world knows the record of the mountain-moving ancestor from Xinjiang Mountain. It is amazing and jaw-dropping. He has done a series of feats that can be regarded as shocking in retrospect. Once in Lizhu Cave he was seriously injured first. Lu Xianyang and then forced Qin Pingan and Ning Yao to join forces to fight against the enemy. The 2 sides dealt with each other for a long time, fist-fighting with Song Changjing, and finally seemed to have provoked Qi Jingchen, just because he wanted to move the Beiwepiyun mountain that now belongs to the Knight Tur Shinjun. Little did they know that Ma Kuxuan had provoked them alone back then. At that time Ma Kuxuan's thoughts were still very different. Instead, he felt that the foreign girl was incompatible with Mu Bottle Lane. If they, with different identities, could come together, the thunder from the sky would stir up the fire on the earth, and they would roll over the sheets or something like that. Very good, a flower inserted in cow dung more interesting. Qin Pingan shook his head and said with a smile, a dummy is just a dummy. It's not a real person after all. You can only follow the pictures and not make any whims. Zhomi said, oh? I begged Qin Jianxian to give me some advice. Qin Pingan said, let me first introduce the earliest names of my 2 natal flying swords, which are the caged bird and the moon in the well. I will correct you again, Lu Kai's flying sword Baiju was originally used to target the caged bird. Feijian Biluo is aimed at Jing Zhongyue. Of course there is no problem with your current judgment. I took bags of gold and copper coins and melted them into a long river of time. I was delusional and overestimated my capabilities, trying to make a bird in the cage. The creation of a small world is also due to the appearance of Lu Kai, and his 2 flying swords gave me a lot of inspiration. The implication is that Qin Pingan, knowing that Lu Kai was waiting for him on the road ahead, instead of taking a detour, went 1 step further. Didn't your white horse ignore the constraints of the long river of time? Then I will do everything possible to collect gold and copper coins everywhere and keep throwing money away. Your Biluo is said to break 10,000 swords with 1 sword? Then let's see how many 10,000 swords you can break, 10 or 100. Zhomi suddenly realized, don't be afraid of death if you follow the path, just walk on the straight path. It turns out that this is sword cultivation. Ma Kuxuan clicked his tongue and said, the head is really hard. Zhomi showed an expression of admiration and said with a smile, it is a good habit to believe in fate but not to accept it. Ma Kuxuan asked in his heart, what should I say? Zhomi replied, it's a bit troublesome. It's not easy to peel off the cocoon. I'm afraid there is a cocoon outside the cocoon. I can roughly infer that this place is one of the fantasy worlds. There are dozens of candidates. I have found the right one so far. There are 32 of them. Although their strength is definitely average and not as good as the Sword Chi Great Wall, it is not difficult for him to use it to get in the way at critical moments and defeat your plans. Ma Kuxuan nodded, this guy has been thoughtful since he was a child. He is good at pretending and is very cunning. In terms of city government, Song Jixin was not worthy of carrying shoes for this neighbor back then. As expected of a fellow man, I was pretending to be a fool, and he was pretending to be a fool. Good people, we all succeeded back then. Qin Pingan seemed to have guessed their intentions, and with a slightly sarcastic tone, he smiled and said, it's useless to give you a chance. Zhomi suddenly said from his heart, be careful. Ma Kuxuan sneered and said, why are you so petty? If you continue to crack the barrier, it would be best if you can completely break it all at once. It doesn't matter if you don't succeed. I'm not used to him anymore anyway. In an instant the sky and the earth changed. The sky was blue and the beauty was lovely. There was not a single snowflake at all. The earth that was originally covered with thick snow suddenly became white without any trace of snow. At the same time, above the city head, a line passed across without any sword light visible. The height of the horizontal line was exactly at the waist of Ma Xuanhuan and Zhou Mi, as if there was an invisible sword fairy, swinging out a sword and cutting across the world. Zhou Mi looked calm, just standing there, letting his body be cut in two by the waist. The upper half of the body was slightly smaller, and there was no scene of flesh and blood splattering. The body was not an illusion. The sword-like cut was indeed a real thing, just chopped open. From the gaps in the two waists, bursts of dazzling colored glaze flowed out and overflowed. The two rays of light rose and fell, seemingly trying to connect together on their own to reassemble the body, but were blocked by the remaining sword intent. The road. This body is like an empty shell of a straw bag, but the straw bag under the skin is truly priceless. It is actually the glazed body refined from a large amount of gold essence and copper coins. As if receiving some kind of instruction from Ma Xuanhuan, Zhou Mi stretched out his hand to hold the pocket-sized thunder pond, the size of a date stone. Another sword light hit the city head, splitting Zhou Mi's head in half. Originally it was just divided into upper and lower parts. The two parts of the body became four parts. In fact, these two sword rays cannot be said to be one or the same, and a complete huge section, the sword rays span the entire small world. The sword light bloomed very fast, and it passed by in a flash, continuously, and cut again and again, cutting the dense shape into pieces. The crisscrossing sword light was left in place, causing the city head to become fragmented, but only remained intact. A rough overview is horrific. Ma Xuanhuan's figure disappeared. Qin Pingan suddenly turned around and held out a sword. An existence like a speck of dust in the sky instantly transformed into a towering Dharma form that was thousands of feet tall, and stepped hard towards the slightly insignificant Qin Pingan on the ground. Ma Xuanhuan, the incarnation of Ma Xuanhuan, who is covered in colorful treasure armor and has a majestic appearance, was cut open from the soles of his feet to his shoulders by the light of the sword that was lifted up, like tofu, without any hesitation. The sword light not only broke through the Dharma image, but the sword energy also spread out to both sides, as if a pair of giant hands were forcefully pushing the Dharma image body of Ma Xuanhuan to both sides. Qin Pingan frowned slightly. It would be normal for an ordinary monk in the same realm to be cut off by a sword in his own world. But Ma Xuanhuan is not an ordinary immortal, and his golden body should not be so fragile. At this moment, Qin Pingan's heartstrings were tense, and his thoughts were changing rapidly. He finally chose a compromise method, avoided fighting, gathered up his whereabouts, and hid. It turned out that when he saw Zhou Mi on top of the city, he instantly returned to normal. The whole person became extremely real, and his aura completely changed. He was so stupid that he was even more real than Zhou Mi. At that moment, Qin Pingan thought that Ma Xuanhuan had actually colluded with Zhou Mi, and as a backup man who stayed in the world, he was only waiting for today to kill him and take away half of one by force. Zhou Mi had a smile on his face and an extremely carefree expression. He raised his arms casually, put his fingers together and made a stroke. Pointing directly at where Qin Pingan was standing, as soon as Qin Pingan stepped forward, an extremely deep ravine appeared on the ground outside the city and spread out. The whole bird in the cage was close to heaven and earth. It was really just a close call, but it was broken. The deepest part of the ravine and the farthest point were about to touch the boundary of heaven and earth. Qin Pingan, who had disappeared, was shocked and frowned. Is it really thorough? Otherwise, a mountaintop monk who is not in the Ascension realm would not be able to create this situation. When he heard Ma Xuanhuan say the word "come out," like a Taoist saint who followed his words, Qin Pingan was dragged out of a secret realm and forced to act. The sea of clouds was rolling and a golden palm created a hole. With lightning speed, it reached towards Qin Pingan, who was hanging in the air and had no time to avoid. The sword was handed out, and it penetrated the golden palm as big as a mountain. It was still smashed down with a huge momentum, and Qin Pingan had no choice but to punch it. The ground trembled and dust flew. Qin Pingan, who was knocked down, knelt on one knee in the center of the pit and vomited a mouthful of blood. Ma Xuanhuan said that he didn't learn boxing, so why was this palm, which he couldn't tell whether it was a technique or a supernatural power, not less powerful than Chaosis boxing technique? There is no need to turn around, Qin Pingan's backhand is just a sword. However, Zhou Mi, who followed him like a shadow, easily grasped the tip of the night sword with 2 fingers. Zhou Mi raised his hand, and the sword energy condensed into a long sword. He returned the sword and slashed towards Qin Pingan's shoulder. Qin Pingan's body transformed into dozens of sword lights, and suddenly recondensed into his true body more than 100 miles away. The next moment, on the ground, Ma Xuanhuan, who seemed to be predicting the future, opened a fist frame and punched himself. The mighty fist is incomparable. Between this punch and Qin Pingan, hundreds of mirrors suddenly shattered and sputtered in all directions, creating a gorgeous scene. This is the advantage of taking advantage of the right time and place. Even if there is a temporary corridor of mirrors to block this punch, Qin Pingan still needs to shrink and move sideways to avoid the punch. It's very strange. When he made a careful seal and recited the word withdraw, the previous ravine on the ground disappeared instantly, as if time went back and returned to the original state. Ma Xuanhuan raised his fingers towards Qin Pingan. Just as Qin Pingan was about to speak, Zhou walked forward slowly and said with a smile, "The swordsmanship of the carver on the city wall, Qin Jianxian, is disappointing." Qin Pingan said, "You don't even dare to say my name. Are you afraid that I will find your hiding place, or are you worried that your real body will detect any clues and shatter your glazed golden body with just one thought?" Zhou said, "I don't dare to call you by your first name, so Qin Jianxian dares to call Zhou by his first name?" Qin Pingan smiled casually and said, "I am a waste. I don't want to stop you from becoming more waste." Zhou said, "I read 2 stories in a book. The protagonists in the stories survived not because they were the protagonists, but because they survived and were the protagonists. The background of a story begins in a place called Mu Ping Lane in Huaihuang County. The protagonist's surname is Qin. The other story ahead begins with a scholarly family in the divine continent of Middle-earth, turns to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, takes up most of the story in the wild world, and ends with Howran. The ending is temporarily undecided." Qin Pingan suddenly said, "I understand, a good method." Sword of Coming Chapter 1220. Chapter 1220. Brilliant. Regardless of whether Qin Pingan really knew or pretended to know, Ma Xuanhuan was indeed deceived. Taking advantage of the moment when Ma Xuanhuan's mind was slightly stagnant and he was stunned for a moment, Qin Pingan felt like he had been amnesty. The caged bird escaped and quickly moved back. Taking a step back, ripples formed in waves, and a portal opened out of thin air behind him. Qin Pingan's figure sank into a secret realm of mountains and rivers that was compared to a cocoon, and left the illusory world of the Sword Qi Great Wall. The dazzling bright red color suddenly disappeared from his field of vision. Ma Xuanhuan couldn't see clearly, but he didn't look anxious at all. However, Zhou saw the way at a glance and explained, "The method of moving mountains is to make the mountains move. Come to my magical power." His move was just a deliberate cover-up. In short, on his own territory he can switch to the secret location at any time, which is more straightforward and more precise than shrinking thousands of miles of earth into a small space. Hidden. In ordinary battles with the same situation, you will be in an invincible position. Ma Xuanhuan said, "Time is limited, stop talking nonsense and lead me to catch up." Zhou nodded with a smile and patted himself on the head, and 3 flowers gathered at the top, transforming into a golden crown that seemed to be made up of Baiyujing, Xianxia, Tuoyue Mountain and other places. Xian converged his figure to the size of a mustard seed, turned into a rainbow light, and swept into the Taoist crown, like an ancient sitting in the center of the heaven. Zhou took a closer look and followed the clues left by Qin Pingan's Dao Qi. He strode forward and opened a door with both hands. He ducked in and came to a bustling market with small bridges and flowing water. There was a sauce garden nearby. As long as the ordinary people on the street are close to Zhou, they will melt away and turn into nothingness. Zhou waved his sleeves and a majestic air swept out. The upper half of all the pedestrians, buildings and hills in this world were cut off. Zhou stamped his feet again, and the lower half of the human world was like a fish turning over. The back was collapsed and dented everywhere, and it was reduced to ruins in the blink of an eye. Everything turned into dust and scattered between the sky and the earth. In the far distance, a grain of light flashed away. Zhou smiled, found it, and sat on the golden Ma Xuanhuan in the Taoist crown, made a sword gesture with his hand, and a sword light flew through the air like a dragon and swept across the top of the mountain. The trajectory of the sword light seemed to be winding, but in fact it coincided with a river flowing through time, which is equivalent to it goes straight down the river, so this is the straightest and shortest way. A ray of sword light was thousands of miles away, hitting the glorious figure that could not dodge. The latter used his fists to fight the sword energy, stubbornly resisting, attacking and defending, and a splash of water sprayed out on the spot. Ma Xuanhuan obviously heard the guy curse, and like a bereaved dog he scurried into another place to hide, and continued to avoid his sharp edge, first delaying time, and then looking for ways to defeat the enemy. Zhou said, "The other party has probably determined that I am not Zhou's real body. If Zhou really used Ma Kuxuan as a human fairy connecting heaven and earth to plot against Qin Pingan, he wouldn't have spent so much time on it, and it would have been completed on the other side of the Sword Qi Great Wall. Ma Kuxuan said angrily, I thought your last words were words that only you could say, which would make him more convinced that you are your true form. Didn't you think that it would actually make him suspicious? Zhou smiled and said, You are superfluous. I warned you at that time to give up when you see good things. You should have faked it all the way to the end and it was completely true. It's like a delicate landscape painting but you have to capture a freehand flower. Anyone who sees it will feel inappropriate. As he spoke, Zhou had already taken a step forward. This time he directly broke through the barrier between the two illusory worlds with his body. He crossed the boundary and changed the ground. A gorgeous scene like the shattering of glass appeared around him. The heavy rain was pouring and there was an escape convoy. On the muddy road, boxes were scattered on both sides, which may have rolled down by themselves or were pushed down by the driver's servants. Many open boxes and books fell out. These were inherited in an orderly manner and had many seals. Rare books have survived fires and insect infestations, but they cannot escape the war. In this war-torn world, the only thing worth less than antiques is probably books. They are heavy and cannot be exchanged for money. If you don't throw them away you will lose nothing. Zhou, who had a golden crown on his head, squatted down and picked up a soft book stained with yellow mud. Ma Kuxuan urged him to quickly find out Qin Pingan's whereabouts. Zhou asked him not to rush, quickly opened the pages of the book, stretched out his fingers and touched to press the word Qin for a moment, and then find the other words peace on another page. Then he shakes his wrist gently, and a rare book that is said to be worth 1 or 2 gold per page is shaken off, leaving only 3 gold pieces. Words hanging in midair. Zhou then lightly stamped his feet, using a method similar to summoning gods and commanding the land. The 3 golden words were shaky and dim, and eventually turned into ashes without any light. They fell into the mud with the rain, but Qin Pingan was still nowhere to be seen. Ma Kuxuan laughed heartily and said, Is it because you don't have enough heat, or is this guy Qin Pingan's golden body too calm to hold his breath? Zhou smiled, then picked up a few more books on the ground, and reconstructed the name, Qin Pingan from the black and white words in the books. Then he quickly found the word Luo, and, from the page of the book, and then took the hidden word from, and the official word from Huanyo respectively. To avoid making a fool of himself again, Zhou simply spelled out Sword Qi Great Wall, Liju Cave Sky, and Mud Bottle Alley together. As a result, 2 treasure urns filled with divine light were hung in front of Zhou, with the words, Qin Pingan of Lualu Mountain, and Hidden Official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi written respectively. In addition, each of the talismans still has a line of narration and footnotes in small characters. Mud Bottle Alley, Liju Cave Sky. Zhou said, It will definitely succeed. Ma Kuxuan understood it in his heart, waited for Zhou's lips to move slightly, and issued another order. Ma Kuxuan, who was waiting for the opportunity, took the lead and punched out, still using Chao Si's punching method and strength. The fist power was much higher than that of Chao Ci in the Qingbai fight in the Chinese Confucian Temple. It was obvious that neither Chao Ci nor Qin Pingan had a tacit understanding at that time and neither of them used their full strength. Qin Pingan, who was forcibly recruited, did not know what methods Ma Kuxuan would use and could not prescribe the right medicine, so it was difficult for him to retaliate. He could only try to defend himself. Apart from a bright red robe on his body, there were tens of thousands of people floating around. The various colored talismans are layered one after another, like dozens of long rivers of talismans, entangled into a ball, protecting the true body in the center of the circle. Unfortunately, despite many methods, Ma Kuxuan's punch still smashed the Fulu River into pieces. The light was distorted and the scene was chaotic. However, Qin Pingan just glanced at Zhou, raised his arms in front of him, and then his body like a stone, it hit a piece of stretched cotton curtain, pulling the cloth toward the center of the stone and gathering it. The world, mountains, rivers, people and buildings were all accumulated in the folds of the cloth. Ma Kuxuan raised his hand, and countless golden bolts of lightning struck crazily at the center of the bottom of the pit. Zhou issued another divine decree to forcibly recall Qin Pingan, the landlord of Fangtiandi. A purple sword light swept out from the center of Zhou's eyebrows and pierced Qin Pingan's head, so close that he could not avoid it. Qin Pingan had no choice but to turn his head slightly, and the slender sword light cut a deep wound on his face with bones visible. In this fight, Ma Kuxuan had the upper hand, and with careful cooperation Qin Pingan, the host, was unable to fight back. When the spiritual light of the imperial talisman was exhausted, Qin Pingan finally regained his freedom and escaped into the boundless void. However, Zhomi followed him like a shadow again. He changed the territory and revealed a Dharma form. He stepped on the earth and trampled a mountain under his feet into powder. He lowered his head and arched his back and stretched out the curtain of the sky with his back. The Dharma minister was wearing golden armor and turned into a 10,000-foot long holding a thunder whip. He hit the ground with a whip, rolled the tip of the whip a few more times, whipped the ground several times, and in the blink of an eye, a building was destroyed. The capital city with millions of residents was reduced to dilapidated ruins and became the battlefield site of the immortal family's battle. A subtle sword light spread along the lightning whip. Ma Kuxuan cut it off with just a flick of his finger. The sword light of a swordsman was so vulnerable. The situation is out of his control. Qin Pingan must change the battlefield again with sword escape, using different geographical locations to exchange for the passage of time and try to delay as much time as possible. Countless uncivilized creatures on the earth looked up blankly at the fire that broke through the sky, making this place look like day in the middle of the night, as if a natural disaster was coming. A huge swamp in a barbarian land was directly filled up by a star falling from the sky. The huge momentum caused the entire small world to be shattered. The cracks of the sky and the Earth's axis were heard one after another. The illusion was like a piece of porcelain that was about to be broken but not broken. Qin Pingan has already left this place and fled to a secret landscape. It's like someone leaving the side door of a house, taking a detour and walking in from the main entrance to kill him. Unexpectedly, a small bronze bell appeared on the horizon, and then a giant hand as white as jade appeared. Just a slight shake and a loud bang shook the whole sky to pieces. The owner of the giant hand, Zhomi, reminded him from the bottom of his heart, "It's been half a stick of incense." Ma Kuxuan grinned and said, "As far as I know, this guy always fights with people through force. He doesn't know how to run away." Having the upper hand but still unable to severely injure Qin Pingan, unable to turn the advantage into a victory, it is like having a pile of banknotes in your pocket that cannot be cashed, which is not beautiful after all. Zhomi smiled and said, before he had not yet mastered sword making, so there was no point in running away. He might as well fight hard. Now that he knows he is invincible, anyone else would choose to retreat. Ma Kuxuan clasped the back of his head with both hands and sat in this messy dojo. I have been running around for so long. I don't know how far he has solved the puzzle. Zhomi said, "Stop delaying, otherwise things will change." Ma Kuxuan smiled lazily and said, "You are an outsider in this game." For Ma Kuxuan, his leisurely pursuit and Qin Pingan's frustrated escape were like the hide-and-seek game often played among children. Ma Kuxuan said regretfully, "I was so frightened that I didn't take the bait." Zhomi said, "You deliberately let him choose the Great Wall of Sword Chi, which is a good move. He will naturally think of me and the boss sword immortal. There is no need for you to make more calculations and foreshadowing, but while he is still kept in the dark, if you didn't make him think of the word Qin Qingdu in his mind, it would be a bad move." Ma Kuxuan said, "It's a pity. It's my fault that I failed to invite the complete third god." Zhomi smiled and said, "I have said it a long time ago. After all, this person is a scholar. He insists on being alone in a dark room and not betraying his heart. Therefore, even in his mind, it is impossible to call Qin Qing by his first name." Ma Kuxuan curled his lips and disagreed. Zhomi said, "It is better to choose Qin Qingdu than to choose left and right." Ma Kuxuan said with a nonchalant look on his face, "The scene needs to be big, so if you have to choose, of course I should choose the one with the best swordsmanship. Even if Qin Qingdu has half of his Taoist skills and 50% off his sword skills, the power won't be too weak, right?" Zhomi smiled and shook his head, looking helpless. It turned out that in Ma Kuxuan's heart-centered world, there were 3 incense tables placed at the same time, but there was only one incense burner with incense and smoke curling up to worship 3 people. In addition to Wenhai Zhomi and Chao Ci in white, there is also an old man with a sword, who is the boss swordsman of the Sword Chi Great Wall, Qin Qingdu. But compared to the first 2, Qin Qingdu's face is relatively blurry, and his figure is ethereal and uncertain. Ma Kuxuan's visualization is similar to some kind of mysterious refining and casting, which can erect a faceless statue of clay and wood sculptures on the altar. Of course, there is a limit to the height of their golden bodies, which is of course linked to Ma Kuxuan's realm. Qi practitioners stop at the ascension stage, and martial artists stop at the ascension stage. Otherwise, since the daring Ma Kuxuan dared to visualize even Wenhai Zhomi, why not just move out the founder of the 3 religions and enshrine him on the altar? The same canonization of landscape gods, the Confucian temple of Zhongtu, the Song dynasty of Dali, and a small country belonging to the Aquarius continent. Although the three canonizations are all reasonable and legal orthodoxy, their ranks are quite different. Qin Pinggan's imagination and thoughts related to someone are equivalent to opening the face of the statue and being responsible for adding gold and color to make the statue lifelike and more real. Ma Xuanhuan carefully prepared 3 god statues, for Qin Pinggan waiting for the latter to go. The thoroughness of Taoism, Xianxia of martial arts, and Qin Qingdu of swordsmanship. It just so happened that these 3 people had all appeared on the Great Wall of Sword Qi. In a secret world where a civil servant was setting up a table by the river to pray for rain, and people were parading through the streets to burn the paper dragon king. Qin Pinggan held a sword in one hand and stretched out his hand to wipe away the blood flowing from his ears to his temples. He has been beaten and his injuries are not serious. Fortunately, his true body, soul and the foundation of his path have not been injured. If Zhoumi's present world is a puzzle for which Ma Xuanhuan has already given clues, then the answer is indeed visualization. Assuming that what Ma Xuanhuan said is true and he did not accept Zhoumi's invitation to ascend to heaven, then of course Qin Pinggan is closer to the truth than Ma Xuanhuan, whether it is Zhoumi's cultivation level or Chaosi's real boxing skills. In other words, Ma Xuanhuan's seemingly cheating magical power has natural limitations. He cannot imagine it out of thin air, but Qin Pinggan has to imagine it. Just like a fishing trip that is sure to make a profit, Ma Xuanhuan visualized when Hai Zhoumi holding a fishing rod, and the fish he caught was a certain person's name that Qin Pinggan was thinking about. As long as Qin Pinggan bites the hook and thinks of someone, Ma Xuanhuan will take the opportunity to lift the rod and put it into the fish basket, becoming real. And this person is Ma Xuanhuan's catch. He has become Qin Pinggan's current imaginary enemy. For example, Xiaoxia. Because Qin Pinggan's thoughts are like a surging river, and all the people Qin Pinggan knows are fish in the water. No, besides Xiaoxia there is also Zhoumi. Qin Pinggan suddenly realized at this moment, when did Ma Xuanhuan, a stubborn man, become so smart? That Zhoumi who first appeared at the top of the city was clearly a hint to Qin Pinggan. Therefore, Zhoumi was just a show at the beginning just to scare people, and his methods were probably not very clever at that time. But after Ma Xuanhuan used the magical power of visualization at a certain moment, Qin Pinggan was always wary of the face-to-face Zhoumi, and was actually given the true meaning by Qin Pinggan. Therefore, it was not until that moment that Zhoumi truly changed from a fake Zhoumi to a fake Zhoumi. A first-class authentic work. Just like a person who was dead in name only, he finally came back to life. In a sense, this is Qin Pinggan asking for trouble. Because whatever you fear in your heart will come true. Ma Xuanhuan quietly tricked Qin Pinggan once, just like a canonization ceremony of a landscape god. Ma Xuanhuan was responsible for the name and piece, and Qin Pinggan, who had mastered the Tao, was responsible for the actual piece. Finally, a story emerged in orthodox apotheosis. Lay people need to burn incense when entering the temple to worship gods. Usually 3 sticks of incense are lit. Presumably Ma Xuanhuan's way of asking gods to come down to the truth is also a similar etiquette. It better be so. What if Ma Xuanhuan lit 9 incense sticks or something? Qin Pinggan would have to endure it for such a long time. I don't dare to stay here for a long time. I don't know what kind of tricks Na Zhoumi used. He is simply haunted. Qin Pinggan didn't wait for the opponent to catch up with him. He managed to take a breath of pure energy and immediately change the venue. Sure enough, as soon as Qin Pinggan walked away, a heavy rain fell in this area with raindrops the size of soybeans. Every raindrop, they are all formed by the condensed sword energy, stabbing the mountains and rivers of the earth into a dense sieve filled with countless holes. Ma Xuanhuan clicked his tongue and said in wonder, Qin Qingda swordsmanship is only half of the Taoist skills. Is it so exaggerated? Zhoumi smiled and asked, finally regret it? Ma Xuanhuan sneered and said, what regrets are there? In my life I like mute-eating Coptish chinensis most. Don't waste it. With half of Qin Qingda sword skills you can use it for real. Zhoumi smiled slightly, held a sword in his hand, and slashed several Qin Pinggan's hearts to heaven and earth with one sword. In order to block this sword light, a knight sword with immortal weapon rank was cut off on the spot. A bright red robe that was also an immortal was torn apart by the unstoppable sword energy. Standing in a vast realm of Taishu, Qin Pinggan returned the 2 broken swords to the long sword behind him. Although the robe on his body was seriously damaged, it was still able to close on its own. Even if his body is almost cut open by a sword, a Qi practitioner in the immortal realm can recover as before after being cut off. However, he has to seriously damage his Taoist practice, fearing that his soul will be damaged. Zhou raised his sword and let the light of the sword fall into the blue sky. A golden arch bridge was chopped into pieces on the spot. Chen Pinggan's defensive swordsmanship seems to have been secretly learned from the ranger Su Ruo. The entire Taishu realm echoed with the violent sound caused by the sword energy. Chen Pinggan stood on the fragmented capital of a golden arch bridge and asked, "What is the price you have to pay?" Setting up altars on the mountain and asking gods to come down require certain rules to be followed. Although Qi practitioners use various methods and choose shortcuts to minimize their own losses, the price that Qi practitioners should pay will never fail. Zhou didn't even bother to remind him in his heart, and directly said, "Why don't you kill him and you can reminisce about the past?" Ma Xuanhuan and Chen Pinggan were like two village children playing house, arranging their troops and facing each other on the mud. One said I had 100,000 soldiers and horses, and the other said I had magic soldiers and generals. You come and I go as long as you dare to think. Of course it was just a quarrel. But just like if one of the kids cheats, his dream can come true but the other one can only dream about it. Chen Pinggan and Zhou each had their own questions, but Ma Xuanhuan answered the question incorrectly. "You actually guessed that you were in a certain situation and that I was the guest. But you only thought about it 3 times but I didn't predict it so it didn't work every time. If you are suppressed by the thought of doing nothing, then you simply don't even dare to think about it anymore." Zhou sighed and said with a regretful expression, "Why bother giving out the answer to the riddle on your own initiative? There will be so many details that you will fail in your efforts." Ma Xuanhuan, what on earth are you thinking?" Chen Pinggan's face was expressionless. In an instant, the 3 altars and statues in Ma Xuanhuan's heart-centered world collapsed, just like the final destination of the statues in the immortal tomb in their hometown, where dust returned to dust and dust returned to earth. Zhou was slightly startled, then thought of the reason in an instant, laughed loudly, and before dissipating, he sincerely praised, "Chen Pinggan, good method as you said before, you want to deceive me sincerely." It turned out that Chen Pinggan used another method of killing himself with a sword, killing Zhou, Chao Xiai and Qin Qing all together in his own state of mind. Ma Xuanhuan tiptoed and stepped on the pillars of a golden arch bridge. He squatted and asked with a smile, "You paid such a high price just to play with me until now. What are you doing?" Chen Pinggan bent his knees and sat cross-legged on the broken pieces of the arch bridge and said, "Prove it with facts. I was just playing with you in the previous fights." Ma Xuanhuan asked doubtfully, "Seriously?" Chen Pinggan sneered, "Why should I lie to a fool?" Ma Xuanhuan tilted his head and stared at his peer. This time, Chen Pinggan was injured so seriously and the price he paid was so high. Even the long sword was broken. "These are not fake." Ma Xuanhuan asked, "Did you really understand Zhou's words from beginning to end? Can you even guess who the 3 people I asked the gods to be? Are you really able to count the last person who is Qin Qingdu?" Chen Pinggan sneered, "Are you still thinking about Qin Qingdu? Come on, give it a try. Let's see if the boss swordsman you invited delivers the sword faster, or if I kill him faster and remember it faster." Ma Xuanhuan asked curiously, "Could it be that you used the trick of reversing the flow of time, right?" Chen Pinggan shook his head and said, "I thought about trying it once or twice, but I don't have the ability for the time being. I can't drag you down. What's more, this method will consume time and is irreversible. It is no less expensive than now." Ma Xuanhuan nodded and said, "This is reasonable. Otherwise it would be too unreasonable. Wouldn't it be that the Ascension realm, which is a level higher than yours, is being teased and applauded by you?" Ma Xuanhuan stood up and said, "If I win, everything will be fine with you. But if I lose accidentally, you have to promise me something." Chen Pinggan said, "Let's talk about it first and then we'll have to say whether we agree or not." Ma Xuanhuan said, "Over at the Ma family's mansion, if you think you deserve to die, you can give them a happy life. If you deserve to live, live. And stop editing memories and manipulating people's hearts." Chen Pinggan remained silent. Ma Xuanhuan smiled and said, "Then I'll take it as your acquiescence." The next moment, Ma Xuanhuan's figure suddenly became as big as immeasurable. He directly grasped an ancient star in the palm of his hand and smashed it towards Chen Pinggan. Chen Pinggan tried it and he was also so powerful. With a wave of his sleeve, he smashed a bright galaxy towards the Dharma form of Ma Xuanhuan. In this dual realm where Chen Pinggan is the bird in the flying sword cage and Ma Xuanhuan's visualization is present, both sides show off their magical powers, and the power of each method is unbelievable. Countless battlefields that were originally filled with stars were turned into large blank ruins by both sides. Fortunately, They are all false appearances, otherwise the great monks of the yin-yang family and the five elements family, plus the chi practitioner of the human Xingtian supervisor, would probably go crazy. However, it is false to the outside world, but it is extremely real to both sides on the battlefield. It cannot be taken lightly. If you are not careful, it will hurt your body and Taoist mind. Time passes slowly. I don't know how long it has been. Ma Kuxuan suddenly invited a statue of Qin Qingdu. Qin Pingan almost instinctively handed out a sword with all his strength. Then he chopped the horse Kuxuan into nothingness along with the illusion. Ma Kuxuan's figure was sitting upright in Taishu. His figure turned into countless golden lights, and a little light appeared on the sky. The golden light carrying the soul could have followed the light and left this cage. Unexpectedly, the golden light stopped for a moment, as if looking back at Qin Pingan, who had been their old enemy for many years. Then the golden light shook on its own, completely shattering the soul. He refused to have another afterlife and would never accept this. Qin Pingan's good intention to defeat his body caused a golden torrential rain in the caged bird. He even seemed to deliberately not look at the sight of the sun again in the Mafu ancestral hall, and everyone woke up from a big dream. It seemed like he just trusted Qin Pingan's verbal promise. The Ma couple only had half a sweet dream. First, their son Ma Kuxuan stopped Qin Pingan. They were able to successfully become a pair of landscape gods protected by Fengdu, and the family blossomed. But the second half failed. It was a veritable nightmare. When he was satisfied, he was suddenly detained and tried in the Xuanhuan temple. The sentence was harsh. He was reincarnated more than 20 times and was not allowed to have a human body. He finally regained his human body and got married again, but he suffered a lot in that life. Died an untimely death. The rest of the Ma family had also woken up. After looking at each other in disbelief, they began to regard each other as enemies. A powerful family with deep roots in Yushuan Kingdom was divided over this. They either committed crimes or fought to separate the family. Qin Pingan stood outside the gate of the Ma family. It was still the Qingming festival, but the rain had stopped. Wearing a green shirt and long coat, with an umbrella under his arm, he walked slowly towards another place. In Changning County, the capital city, Taoist priest Wu Di, who worked as a fortune teller, even stayed in the house he rented later. Qin Pingan had just passed by the Yamen shrine when he heard a familiar voice and came to the top of the Sword Chi Great Wall in a daze. On top of the city stood the ceremonial saint. The current situation is both true and false. Qin Pingan put away the umbrella under his arm and bowed in salute. The Li Xing nodded in greeting and said, "The Zhoumi imagined by Ma Kuxuan is fake, so you don't have to worry about it. But I can't guarantee whether Zhoumi will pass this matter and see your current situation, realm and mentality." Qin Pingan breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing is false, hearing is true. Li Xing said, "The injury is not serious." Qin Pingan said, "Compared with the earliest expectations, it is still a bit better. I have to refining my sword, wandering at night, and mending that immortal robe. It's better to have a headache than to fall into a state of decline." Having seen the Zhoumi behind Ma Kuxuan before, he knew that he had to be cautious in this matter. If it turned out that Zhoumi had left a trail in the world, the consequences would be disastrous. You must let the Confucian Temple know about this immediately, and at the same time try to prevent the Confucian Temple sages from interfering with your revenge. It is not easy to say it is simple, but it is not that difficult to say it is difficult. If you have anything to do, go to the sage. But Qin Pingan only knew the magic power of shrinking the earth, but he didn't know how to cross continents in one step like the Fire Dragon Master. He was destined to be unable to rush to the Chinese Confucian Temple to report the matter. It was too late to send a message with the flying sword, so he had no choice but to use the most straightforward method, is to call out the true name of the ceremonial saint several times in your heart. At that time Li Xing just replied, "I understand," and said nothing more. Even so, Qin Pingan still took reassurance, walked out of Ma's ancestral hall, and just let go of his hands and feet to catch and fight with Ma Kuxuan. The Li Xing asked, "How does it feel to have endured for many years and had your great revenge repaid?" Qin Pingan looked a little tired, so he casually squatted on the top of the city and looked into the distance. In this world, except for the Sword Chi Great Wall, which was strictly in line with reality, in addition, the mountains and rivers in the wild world deviated greatly from the real situation. 100,000 mountains, Toyue Mountain, Ilua River and other places that Qin Pingan has been to and seen with his own eyes have all been moved and clustered together, like a warehouse where objects are stored. Qin Pingan was silent for a moment and said calmly, "I did something that I had to do, but I don't seem to feel much joy. It just takes it for granted." Li Xing smiled and said, "If you want a drink, feel free to do so." Chen Pingan took out the sword-raising gourd and drank it. Li Sheng Buting asked, "If you were in my position, what would you do?" "You don't need to say more, just summarize it in one sentence." Chen Pingan was speechless for a moment. He had never thought about such a big question. How should I answer it? In ancient times, Li Xing once joined forces with Mr. Sanshan Jiuho to create a far-reaching change. Descendants who know something about this old almanac often think that the failure is to be lenient and the failure is to be close. In fact, on the contrary, it is because the laws and regulations re-edited by the Li Sheng are too complicated and meticulous. Chen Pingan thought carefully for a moment and said tentatively, "Want to find the greatest common denominator for all living things in the world?" Li Xing nodded and said with a smile, "This is not a bad answer. He is worthy of being a national master." Chen Pingan didn't say anything. It was not bad but not good. I am no stranger to this kind of public talk. Chen Pingan hesitated for a moment, plucked the snow at his feet, grabbed a snowball and bravely said, "Xing Li, don't let me go to the Confucian temple as an errand?" Assuming that the Li Xing reaches the 15th realm, there will be an extremely important vacancy in the Confucian temple, and someone must take his place to handle the complicated affairs of the two highest and lowest places in the world. Of course, Chen Pingan didn't mean to fill the vacancy of the position of the ceremonial saint. No matter how brave he was, he would not dare to think so. Rather, it was similar to the relationship between the minister and the doctor in the 6 departments of the secular dynasty. The two were several grades apart, but the latter's official duties were a little bit more. Li Xing glanced at Chen Pingan, half smiling but not smiling. Chen Pingan immediately knew that he was overthinking it. Li Xing rarely joked, "You really dare to think and do it? Why don't you just say that you can fill my place in the Confucian temple?" In this way there is no burden in chatting, and Chen Pingan has nothing to be embarrassed about. He really wants to chat openly without any restrictions. Who brought up the trend of summer palace? Because Li Xing needs to sit outside and keep an eye on the path of the Qingdao. After Yu Xian returned to the Xinghe dojo, he briefly mentioned Chen Pingan's path to breaking through the realm with Li Xing. In his words he expressed great appreciation. Everyone calls Chen Pingan Chen Daoyu. Chen Pingan asked, "In all these years has there ever been a time when Li Xing couldn't help but take action?" The Li Xing smiled and said, "You are no longer young. How can you behave like this if you fight and kill?" Chen Pingan was not sure for a moment whether the words of Li Xing were expressed with emotion or a pun. In short, this sentence only meant the literal meaning. If Xiaomo and Xiego were present, they would not like to hear it. I once heard Xiego talk about an embarrassing incident of her family's Xiaoma. Next to that stupid big scholar, there was a scholar who was very good at fighting. He never lost in a fight. Xiaoma was not convinced and said that he was also a ruthless scholar. People are afraid of their eggs. As a result, after the sword questioning was over, Xiaomo told the master of Bixiao Cave in Luobaotan that the young master was not weak in ability. Chen Pingan couldn't believe Xiego. After all, she liked to exaggerate, so she went to the person involved to seek confirmation. At that time Xiaomo was angry. Since she didn't refute, it was the truth. The Li Xing asked, "In the wild battlefield, the Confucian temple's arrangements are quite stable, but there is a lack of a position similar to your sword qi Great Wall prisoner. Do you have any ideas? Don't worry, there will be rewards." Chen Pingan did not hesitate and said categorically, "No." Li Xing nodded and did not embarrass Chen Pingan, "Then find someone else." Chen Pingan knew that this was the style of Li Xing, who acted vigorously and resolutely, and said exactly what he said. "There is no need to go around with a junior like me. When it comes to the position of criminal officer, anyone who takes it will be on pins and needles. Those with low realm cannot convince the public. For those whose realms are high enough, such as Longhu Mountain Celestial Master Zhang Tianlai, Huolong Jinren and others who are highly respected, it is not a matter of dissatisfaction with others, but a matter of embarrassment for them. When you become a criminal, you must offend others. It is not difficult to torture the demon clan, but it will be thankless if you talk about rewards and punishments within xianxia." Li Sheng smiled and said, "No need to feel burdened if you refuse this matter." Chen Pingan nodded and continued drinking. "The only one I am most familiar with in the wild world is the Great Wall of Sword Qi. The most well-known person in the wild world is Chen Pingan, but there is no one else. Zheng Juzhong of Beidasheng was actually the best candidate, and indeed the first choice for the Confucian temple. Zheng Juzhong was already good at everything, let alone now possessing 314 realms in one person. It's a pity that Zheng Juzhong declined. Not only that, Zheng Zhuzhong even asked himself to withdraw from the wild world on the grounds that he wanted to retreat in Baidi City. Li Xing actually knew very well that Zheng Zhuzhong wanted to make further progress and was ready to formally establish a religion and proclaim himself his ancestor. Li Xing suddenly asked, "Have you ever been to the Xuanhuan mountain of fellow Taoist monk Zhisher?" Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "I've only seen it from a distance but I've never had the chance to go." Li Xing said, "You can go to the Shirwanda mountain in the south and the Mirage ruins in the north if you want to go today. In half an hour you will return to the city on time. Remember not to delay, otherwise you will have to run back to the Aquarius by yourself. Continent." Qin Pingan stood up and was about to speak when the Li Xing disappeared. On the top of the tallest mountain in the center of Shawandashan, Qin Pingan had just fallen to the ground when he saw a rickety old man with his hands behind his back. He was as skinny as wood, with sunken cheeks, and was skinny and skinny. But it is such a seemingly old person who has been rooted here for thousands of years with the dojo. The great ancestor of Toiwa Mountain has no choice but to never take the half-step to reach the 15th realm. I remember Bai Jing commented on this matter. If she had been the co-owner of the wilderness, she would have used the entire Toiwa Mountain to smash this 100,000 mountain. Qin Pingan cupped his fists and said, "Junior Qin Pingan has met the seniors in the temple." The old blind man said, "Ning Yatu just left not long ago. It's a pity that your level is low and you are an immortal. Even if you set out now, you won't be able to catch up with her. Ning Yatu is almost at Fuyao continent." Qin Pingan said straight to the point, "I have something I want to ask my senior." The old blind man said, "You want to ask me why I watched Ning Yatu get injured in Liju Cave?" Qin Pingan said, "It's not a question, it's just a question." The old blind man rubbed his chin. "According to my temper, I will definitely take action. A great wall of sword chi. Over the course of thousands of years, there are only a handful of sword cultivators that I like. From the earliest dragon lord to the one with everything. Very good, but Xuanhuan, whose luck is a bit worse, Dong Sanjian, who was bitten by a dog when passing by, and Ning Yao, there are just a few of them, they are all counted, but they are not more than one hand. But Qin Qing seems to have taken the wrong medicine, but at that time he stopped me and said there was no need to take action. Do you think it's strange?" Qin Pingan asked, "What secret did the last priest reveal to the boss sword immortal before he left?" The old blind man said perfunctorily, "Qin Qing is dead, but the Yen kingdom is not dead. When did you become more mature and courageous? Finally, you don't have to be that humiliating tortoise who dares to wander around in the Qingming world. Lord Yingguan, please go and ask Yengui yourself." Qin Pingan knew that he couldn't ask any more secrets, so he said goodbye with his hands clasped and planned to visit the former site of the Mirage. As a result, I hit a wall and had to turn back. The old blind man smiled and said, "Come when you want, leave when you want. Does Mr. Yingguan think this is a cesspool?" There was no expression on Qin Pingan's face, and there was not a single word in his voice. His Taoist heart remained unchanged. The old blind man with empty eyes raised his head and looked at the swordsman in front of him. The swordsman, who was less than 50 years old, was considered outstanding in the history of the Sword Chi Great Wall. He clicked his tongue and said, "How many Qin will we kill? How can Pingan become such a Qin Pingan? Have you done any rough calculations or statistics?" Qin Pingan said, "There are too many to count." The old blind man laughed. "I've always had a bad mouth. When I talk to people, I like to spit out of my mouth as if I've just eaten hot shit. Don't mind me." Qin Pingan was caught off guard. "You definitely won't be able to win if you fight, and you are afraid of encountering someone like this when you quarrel." The old blind man stretched out his nails, gently grabbed a bit of flesh and said with emotion, "I really encountered someone who was not an eyesore. Even if I asked you to come in, I slapped you back. When I met someone who was not an eyesore, I'm too lazy to talk nonsense. So don't think that if you killed Ma Kuxuan of Xinghua Lane, the half-owner of my eyeball, I would be disgusted with you. Far from it, I would choose him back then. It's because Ma Kuxuan's child has the least human touch." Qin Pingan did not comment on this and just asked, "Xiego also left?" The old blind man raised his chin and said, "Bai Jing found a place on the top of a mountain to open a cave. She said she was going to be in seclusion for a few days, but in fact she was just hiding there for fun. Here I have to urge her to break through." Qin Pingan asked, "Is there any sign of her breaking through?" The old blind man said, "No, she really wants to find a certain path and has a chance to break through. If I push her every now and then, it will be no fun." Qin Pingan was speechless. "Are you kidding? A perfect sword cultivator in the Ascension realm? Sure enough, the 14th realm is amazing." The old blind man laughed and said, No matter how poor your Taoist qualifications are, as long as you can live for 10,000 years, is it still considered a skill? Qin Pingan said, the coveted ability to reach heaven. The old blind man asked, do you know that blacksmith Xuan of Fengxue Temple, before going to Lizhu Cave, he had a proud disciple, but the two parties could not get back together well, and the relationship between master and disciple was severed? Qin Pingan nodded and said, I checked the files of the Ministry of Punishment in the Great Li capital before. His name is Lu Jingzhuang. He likes divination and admires Lu Qi. It is said that he had inner demons and voluntarily left Fengxue Temple because of his mediocre aptitude for cultivating. Then according to the secret, the Fengxue Temple genealogy recorded in the records shows that Lu Jingzhuang was actually from the Lu family of the old Qinshui kingdom. His identity is actually similar to that of the water god Yanghua, who is now the Changchun Marquis of Dadu. The old blind man sneered, then do you know that in your Aquarius continent, the Longwei River that spreads out from the Lizhu Cave? The Qin family, as the eldest grandson of the contemporary family head, Qin Songfeng, one of his private tutors, what is your name? Qin Pingan said, according to the archives, Fuzi Liuzuan has a clean life, ancestral background, place of birth, resume, and official career. They are all well documented. The Qin family of Longwei she screened it once, and the Dali Punishment Department ran it again. I didn't think much about it. Back then, Qin Pingan was deeply impressed by Qin Songfeng, a frail scholar who was gentle and polite. Among foreigners, Qin Songfeng, as a son of a wealthy family, was evaluated by Qin Pingan in his heart as a good person who must have read many books. Back then, Qin Songfeng followed him, Ningyao, and Lu Baqiao into the mountains to look for the regular tree. Because Qin Songfeng had never practiced martial arts or Taoism, and his legs were too weak, he became a drag. Was quite upset, but Qin Songfeng had no complaints. What was rare was that he didn't even have any resentment in his heart. At that time, Qin Pingan, although he still hadn't seen much of the world's frogs in the well, he still had a good eye for seeing people by relying on intuition and observing the details of a person's words and deeds. The old blind man said calmly, you are just a teacher hired by a wealthy family, but you can tell a young man who clearly has no qualifications to practice Taoism that sitting on the Taoist ancestor's lotus is nothing, and going to a blessed place to be a banished immortal who has given up his past? Qin Pingan raised his head and glanced at the sky. Seeing that Qin Pingan had understood, the old blind man said to himself, I wonder what the world will be like in 1,000 years. Qin Pingan said, maybe people's hearts are still the same. The old blind man asked a question for no reason. I have never thought about it. In addition to the demons who were forcibly suppressed by Daozu, and your senior brother Cui Chan voluntarily discarded the unused porcelain figures, are there any other possibilities just like the same thing thousands of years ago? The world has been turned upside down, and the master has changed again? Qin Pingan hesitated for a moment and said in his heart, unexpected, but I hope it won't happen one day. If it does happen, I just hope that we can leave a way out. The old blind man patted the young swordsman on the shoulder and said, Qin Qingdu is not good at looks, but he has good eyesight. Qin Pingan smiled bitterly and was speechless. The old blind man remembered something and pointed to the north. Gontang and his apprentice happened to pass by here, and now they are on the other side of the mirage. Not long ago, Ning Yata persuaded this old deaf child to go to your Luapa mountain as an offering. Gontang Tang became very excited when he heard the proposal, and Pidian agreed, making up his mind to make a living with you in the future. Qin Pingan always felt that something was wrong. With the old deaf child's behavior of hiding away when something happened, it was unlikely that he wanted to go to Aquarius Island. Since he met Ning Yao by chance, he wanted to follow her to the colorful world. It is more reasonable. To say the least, if the old deaf child really wants to seek refuge with him, he is probably more likely to go to Tongyi's Hao Qingping sword sect. The old blind man sighed for no reason. Happiness gradually leads to sadness. Qin Pingan thought carefully and said slowly, vice versa. The old blind man chuckled and said, some people say that the last hidden official of the Sword Qi Great Wall is young and promising, responsible and strategic, and has both civil and military skills. His future is limitless. Qin Pingan knew something was wrong and refused to answer the call. The old blind man continued, he is a person who can enter the martial arts temple to worship with him while he is still alive. When Qin Pingan heard this, his head was as big as a dustpan. The old blind man said, what if he enters the Chinese Confucian temple and eats pig head meat at the same time? Doesn't it mean that one person enters both the civil and military temples at the same time? Qin Pingan, who was already haggard now, almost felt uneasy after hearing this. He had to take a deep breath to stabilize his emotions. Shanzhu Qin, who was used to a certain custom in Luapa Mountain, couldn't bear this kind of flattery, not to mention the flattery with ulterior motives. There has never been such a figure in the history of all the great dynasties in the world. Occasionally, in some small countries in history, there are people who can join the civil and military temples, but even so, they are still only a handful. Enter the Qin Earth Divine Continent Confucian Temple and the Military Ancestral Martial Temple at the same time? No matter who it is, don't even think about it. Qin Pingan asked in a deep voice, "Senior, may I ask which said those stupid things? I'm gonna rip his head off." The old blind man smiled and said, "Just forget about your polite words. Why bother asking questions?" Qin Pingan said with a smile, "I must go and meet him for a while to express my gratitude in person." The old blind man was silent for a moment and gave the answer, "Me." Qin Pingan was silent for a long time. "Thank you for your love, senior." I don't know if it was the Taoist name or the old blind man whose name was Jitsi, said, "It's a pity." Qin Pingan knew what the senior was talking about, but he couldn't say anything. Years ago there were two children of the same age. One of them has the best fate but he doesn't think so. One of them is the hardest hit and he doesn't even know who he is. Their family backgrounds are different but their moods are similar, so they all live lonely lives. During their childhood they never played or roughed up with their peers. The stars are also shining brightly, and there are people holding their cheeks and looking at the sky, sitting on the small earthen bag in the immortal tomb. Someone was lying on the ridge in the field, holding a piece of grass in his mouth and crossing his legs. The water in the ditch was gurgling. They looked at the same starry sky together. Sword of Coming Chapter 1221. Chapter 1221. Who is it? For some unknown reason, Gu temporarily changed his mind and took his maid Lingxian and national master Huang Lai back to the Taoist temple with a tiny front. Gu walked to the door, reached for the copper door knocker and knocked 3 times, but there was no response for a long time. Gu Lingyan was too lazy to wait any longer. She walked straight to her young master, clenched her fist and knocked on the door with a loud bang. Inside the Chongyang Temple, which was known as the Alchemy Temple in ancient times, it seemed that I finally heard the movement outside the door. I opened the door with a creak and walked out 2 skinny young Taoist boys, one tall and one short, with the same sallow complexion and skinny muscles. It is indeed a cold temple, so it would be strange if the food is full of oil and water. Gu shook his head with the 2 Taoist boys standing at the threshold, and then smiled and said, "I'm sorry to disturb the 2 Taoist boys who are practicing. I want to enter your temple to ask for a drink of water, but I don't know if it's feasible." The tall Taoist boy suddenly blushed and groaned, not knowing how to reply. The short Taoist boy next to him, who had a straight face, barely had the words, "expulsion order" on his forehead, and smiled broadly after hearing this. "My name is Song Juchuan, and this is my junior brother Zhong Shan. Our junior brothers have not yet been conferred with the magic weapon, so we do not have a Taoist title yet. We usually only help the master by refining several pots of life-prolonging souls for the wealthy families in the capital who line up to visit." Dan. Introducing these distinguished guests into the temple, Song Juchuan deliberately lowered his voice and said, "Master Imperial Master and our master call each other Taoist friends, and we often drink and discuss Taoism in the Taoist temple." Huang Lai, who was walking at the end of the team, laughed, "Why don't I know that I have been here before? I didn't even know that Chongyang Temple's elixirs were so popular in the capital." Gu Lingyan squinted at the horizon and only saw the vision in general. A pure golden light disappeared in an instant. She vaguely guessed that an expert had interpreted the image and the cicada had shed its corpse. Although it is not comparable to those orthodox ascensions, it is still a superior corpse that is completely reborn. Gu Lingyan thought that he still had this bit of vision. In the wild world there were often great monks who followed the steps and could not get promoted. There was no way out, so they would settle for the next best thing and choose a dark place to build a mausoleum or an underground palace. The road passed down from ancient times for tomb owners or temple owners to ascend to immortality is carefully laid out, focusing on the transformation of form, resurrection from the dead, achieving the body of a ghost or immortal, or giving the reincarnated body a chance to become immortal and ascend to the immortal realm. After just visiting the Qingtian prison, she made a decision. It seemed that she would humbly ask the young master for advice and seriously learn the art of qi reading. Gu Lingyan asked in his heart, "Master, is there any result?" Gu nodded. Gu Lingyan couldn't help but ask, "But Ma Kuxuan's skills are not as good as others and he can't defeat Master Chen. His body was cut off and his life's practice was ruined. It's a pity that Ma Kuxuan still used the magic to save his life in the end. Escaped by luck? Or what's worse, Ma Kuxuan had already planned to use xianxia's swordsmanship to help him escape, hoping that do it all over again in the next life. Guken didn't even raise his head. As long as it's something he has thought about deeply and repeatedly before deciding to take action, there will definitely be no surprises. Besides, with Wangqi and Shiji you are a layman and can only watch the fun. Gu Lingyan was extremely curious and asked, "May I ask, Master, what happened to Ma Kuxuan? That is one of the 10 candidates in the world. Is it just that cold? If Ma Kuxuan were replaced by a wild monk, he would definitely be among the heavenly stems, and his future would be bright." In fact, she also knew that the second possibility she speculated on was impossible. What kind of temper Ma Kuxuan is can be determined by those deeds alone. Ma Kuxuan was one of the few people in this world full of rules that made her feel close to her as soon as she heard rumors about him. Guken said, "I don't know the truth either. You can ask him later." Gu Lingxian lamented and said with resentful eyes, "How dare I? My teeth will chatter when I see Mr. Yingguan." It is easy to misunderstand when looking at the small entrance of the Taoist temple from the outside. It is estimated that the scale is not large. Once you enter the Taoist temple, you will realize that it is a cave. It occupies a very considerable area. As you enter, you will pass through corridors and winding corridors. The young Taoist boy named Song Juchuan was a chatterbox. While leading the group of guests inside the Taoist temple, he kept talking, "Our master is the abbot of this temple. He comes from a well-educated family, is young and strong, and is originally from the imperial court." Later he became disheartened and did not want to join in the officialdom, so he always lived as a mountain man. He likes to go into the mountains to collect Ganoderma lucidum. He has stopped cooking for a long time. On weekdays he only needs to take huangjing poria and coarse food. The huangjing is pickled from the white rice grown in the vegetable garden. There is also a self-made brew in the Taoist temple. Although water is burned with earth, you can't buy it elsewhere even if you have money. Our master is a real old immortal, over 100 years old and has a strong appearance. Even in the cold and snowy season he refuses to wear cotton wool. Yes, when I stand on the Xuanhuan zhuang or meditate, my whole body will be filled with white gas. The tall Taoist boy felt cold sweat break out on his forehead. Senior brother Song was so good at talking. Just thinking about the lack of popularity of his Taoist temple, Zhongshan admired and appreciated senior brother Song's good intentions again. Guken smiled and said, "I only heard that when a Taoist practitioner exhales and refines qi, smoke of different colors such as green and white will emit from the ears, nose and orifices. The amount depends on the Tao power. Taoist classics name it crane breath." Song Juchuan fisted his palm. "Yes, I remember master introduced it to me, those few puffs of smoke are called crane breath." Guken was silent for a moment and said with a smile, "I made up the phrase crane breath." Song Juchuan suddenly became speechless, with a look of astonishment on his face. "Okay, the incense money is gone. Does the Taoist temple have to pay for a pot of tea? Master is not generous and still holds grudges. The ancient cypress trees shade the pond, the flowers fall like fallen birds, and the swimming fish peck and eat them. There are 2 cats by the pond. One has pure white fur and a single yellow tail. It is commonly known in the market as a silver vase hanging on a gold rope. It squats as if looking into the water to catch fish. The other has a yellow body, a white belly and white feet, and is named Jin Bei In Bed. Butterflies fluttering and playing." Song Juchuan grinned and said, "Wild cats often go to the kitchen to steal food. The dull Zhongshan has something to say and they can't steal anything to eat." Compared to senior brother Song, Zhongshanku was the clumsiest and slow to learn anything. His master always said that he was an ignorant person. If he could practice Taoism, there would be no one in the world who could not cultivate immortality. There is an old Taoist under the Panasonic in the temple with snow-white hair on his temples, wearing a pair of straw shoes on his feet, on his shoulder, and a bamboo basket in his hand. There are some pieces of poria cocos stained with soil in the bamboo basket. With a sigh, he raised his head and glanced at the sky. The old Taoist priest counted his fingers and shook his head. In short, it is becoming increasingly difficult for people to understand this world. The old Taoist walked slowly, and when he saw the group of people, he couldn't help but feel doubtful. His Taoist temple was usually closed, but there were actually pilgrims who took the initiative to knock on the door? Did you get money for getting on the pole? Is such a beautiful thing really possible? I'm afraid that if the good ones don't come, those who come will be unkind. The two Taoist boys saluted and said, "Disciple pays homage to Master Jing." The old Taoist's face remained normal. He nodded in greeting, handed the hose and bamboo baskets to the two disciples, and prepared to entertain the guests in person. The old Taoist had already freed up his hands, made a gesture and said with a carefree smile, "Pindao Qing Feng Xian." Both disciples are accustomed to call Pindao Master Jing. Pindo's native place is in Shui Prefecture, his monastery is in Liangshan, and he is a wandering cultivator. I traveled to other continents a few years ago and stopped here. There is no serious title, it is self-proclaimed, and it cannot be taken seriously. It is the same as the private posthumous title of the literary scholar Lin, so I don't mention it so as not to make people laugh. Gukan asked, "But what about Duliang Mountain near Shui Water Mansion?" Cheng Fengxian nodded in agreement, greatly surprised, and said in surprise, "Young master is really knowledgeable. People in the world have only heard of Shui Water Mansion but not Duliang Mountain. If they knew more about the past they would only know about the refinement of half a Tongling tomb. Du Xiaocai, who is in Shanshan and half of the Shui shrimp soldiers, how can he know everything about Liangshan?" Huang Lai asked in confusion, "Du Xiaocai?" Cheng Fengxian smiled and refused to explain. Gukan introduced, "In the history of the Middle-earth divine continent, there was a Mr. Wusong named Du, nicknamed Du Xiaocai, and he was a master refiner as famous as Mrs. Su. Shui Prefecture, the prefecture and county offices are all located on the mountain. Raising one's eyebrows is called Su, and staring straight at Shui means far-sightedness, hence this popular ancient name. Along the way, the scenery along the way was impressive, with ancient buildings and flowers and trees. Huang Lai couldn't help but praise the good feng shui. I used to be in the dark under the lamp, but I didn't know there was such a feng shui treasure right under my nose." The old Taoist priest led them to a hut called Zhonglu, not far from the ancient pine trees. Gukan glanced at the plaque with graceful handwriting. Cheng Fengxian pointed to the ancient pine. This pine was planted by the founder of this Taoist temple. It has been there for many years. There are poria cocos underneath and it is almost in human form. Gu Lingyan glanced at the scene under the ancient pine trees, secretly covered his mouth and smiled. He was indeed the kind of master who could have any kind of disciple, and could brag without drafting. Gukan smiled and said, "Immortal Chang Gaofeng." The implication is that he dares to speak openly about this matter to outsiders. Gu Lingyan asked Huang Lai alone with his heartfelt voice, "Can you see the strange rustic nature of poria cocos becoming a spirit?" Huang Laizhao said truthfully, "I can't see anything." The old Taoist stretched out his hand and said with a smile, "Don't make any mistakes," which frightened the distinguished guests. At the Taoist priest's fingertips, the two cats turned into butterflies and flew away in colorful colors. Gu Lingyan pretended to be surprised, her face turned pale and she let out an ouch, then leaned on Gukan's shoulder. Gukan just put his hand against her forehead, pushed it away gently and said with a smile, "How?" "I said that there are many strange people in the world, and real heroes often live in seclusion in the rivers and lakes. You don't believe it and you say that I am suspicious." Gu Lingyan cooperated with his young master in acting, as if he had realized it in hindsight, and timidly looked at the old Taoist. "Cave realm? Viewing the sea?" When he came to the door of the hut, Gukan suddenly stopped and said with a smile, "I am not a person who is engaged in serious work. I like to read miscellaneous books and some side knowledge. I now apply what I have learned. When I see the treasures of the gods of your place, I will be boiling with red purples." It was like a dragon and a tiger dominating the air. Then I knocked on the door and knocked on the door. Unexpectedly, I met a rare master from this world that we common people could not encounter in 100 years. He was guarding the poria cocos and becoming a spirit. I dared to ask Jing for advice. "Master, is it to take Xingxian?" Cheng Fengshuan's face suddenly changed. He no longer had the slightest trace of immortality. He put his fingers together to form a halberd and pointed at the young man in a scholar's shirt who looked like a rich man. The old Taoist stared sternly and said, "I have long seen that you three have ulterior motives. With my maid and servants, it is not good to go wandering anywhere, but you dare to come here to make trouble, like a loach chasing a duck. You are looking for death." Gukan smiled and said, "Master Jing doesn't have to pretend to be evil and scary to scare us mortals. People in the city regard life as 7 feet, and Taoists in the mountains regard life as 7 feet. I believe that with Master Jing's state of mind and cultivation, what he cultivates is inner Dan, first used poria cocos to transform into a spirit, which was sensational, and then used illusions to turn cats into butterflies. Do you want us to retreat in the face of difficulties? Or are you attracted by the qualifications of the maid next to me, and think she has a certain level of Taoism? The old Taoist priest stroked his beard and nodded, his eyes showing admiration. Young master is elegant and well-mannered. Gukan said calmly, the fisherman's respect. The old Taoist priest laughed dumbly. After decades of practicing here, this is the first time I have met such an honest person. Gukan said, how did Master Jing determine that we are not bad guys? Cheng Fengxian twisted his beard and said with a smile, I know a little about yin and yang prophecies, astrology and fortune-telling and the skills of traveling around the world, but I dare not say that I can enter the palace, and I am far away from being a proficient person. Gukan hesitated for a moment and said slowly, I once saw 2 sentences in someone's reading notes, which are related to this. The old Taoist priest said oh and said with a smile, I would like to hear the details. Gukan said slowly, when people talk about astronomy today they only go to Lindu to inquire about calculations. I say that the movement of heaven makes a gentleman constantly strive for self-improvement. This is the astronomy recommended by the founders of the 3 religions. When people talk about geography today, they all investigate and survey the territory. I say that the terrain is good and the gentleman carries things with great virtue. This is the geography that the founders of the 3 religions have witnessed together. Master Jing, do you think so? The old Taoist was surprised and suddenly realized after hearing this with a face full of mixed emotions and said, if we, the Taoist cultivators, can really embody the 2 images of heaven and earth into ourselves, it is only a small trick of yin and yang, 5 elements and prophecies, how can it be considered Taoist? A wise man can never deceive a fool. A fool will always believe a lie to be true. Why do you say this, master? Just say whatever you feel. By the way, who is the person you are talking about? Can you recommend me to Pindao? Cannot. Dare to ask the immortal's Taoist number. Take your own way and return to your fortune. On the top of Jiao Mountain, on the high branches of a towering ancient tree, there were 3 people standing or squatting. Not far away is the temple of the mountain goddess Nyang, where the golden body of Songwei is enshrined. Standing is Ma Kuxuan's maid Shudian. Standing is the eldest disciple Wang Zhu. Ma Kuxuan changed his name to him. He said that the name and Taoist name can be combined into one, and the province is long? In fact, a few of them knew it well. Not only did it form an idiom with Shudian, but also because it had some homophones with the real dragon Wang Zhu. Ma Kuxuan's practice has absolutely nothing to do with the word diligence, but he has great love for his direct descendants. Whether it is teaching thunder techniques or giving guidance on martial arts, it can be said that he has given all his money to this pioneer. I am afraid that there are not 50 but 40 books on Taoism and boxing among my disciples. Today the realm of Wang Zhu is the 2 golds, the golden elixir realm and the golden body realm. His qualifications can be described as outstanding, but because his master is Ma Kuxuan he seems to be average and not very impressive. There is also a squatting young man with a hatchet on his waist, named Gao Ming. He and Ma Kuxuan, the master is not like the master, and the apprentice is not like the apprentice. They like to call Ma Kuxuan Old Ma. He even asked Ma Kuxuan face to face if he could switch to Luapa Mountain for 2 reasons. One was that he felt he had more potential, and the other was that he wouldn't have to look down upon and be unwelcome wherever he went. The hatchet boy frowned and asked, what's going on? Did the old horse lose? Wang Zhu remained silent. There is no need to waste your breath on things that are obvious. Gao Ming looked away and said, Senior brother, we can't catch up even if we chase him? Then how can we find the reincarnation of the master? Looking at the direction, they were heading towards the Middle Earth Divine Continent. How could they find it? If they went north it would be fine. It would be Beiju Luzhou. If they went south they might at most be the main continent. Or Tongyi's Hao, there is at least a glimmer of hope. Now going west, the sky is huge, it is not like finding a needle in a haystack. Wang Zhu looked sad and said in a deep voice, only one who is an immortal can barely catch up with that golden light. Besides, Master said that as long as we lose this fight, there is no need to look for him. It is doomed to be in vain. Gao Ming continued, Master also said that as soon as he dies, you can restore your identity and real name. It should be called Su Qingshan. It is a really good name. Master asked me to tell you one more thing. You don't have to think about how to deal with it anyway. You have taken revenge. If you see that man named Chen when you are walking on the road, remember to kowtow to him a few times as a thank you for his kindness in helping you take revenge. The woman was silent, her eyes were complicated and her face was pale. Ma Kuxuan left Chen Pingan with 3 puzzles. Just let Qin Pingan be careful and careful. The answer lies with these three people. Ma Kuxuan not only asked them to keep their secrets, but also told them that if one day they wanted to go to Lualu Mountain to join Qin Pingan, or if Qin Pingan found them one day, they could tell the answer to the mystery. As for whether it was a stepping stone or a way to save their lives, it doesn't matter what they choose, it's all arbitrary. The answer to the mystery is the names of three people. Like Ma Kuxuan, these three people are the younger generation of Lizhu Cave Heaven. For example, the person Gao Ming knows is named Lu Jingchun. It seems that he is a descendant of the Lu family in Fulu Street, and is now working for the Su family in Qingfeng City. In the capital city god's temple of Yuxuan Kingdom, two outsiders came. They clearly came from across the mountains and rivers in Shudi, but they were able to avoid disturbing the local city god. If I had to use an analogy to describe the scene when these two people came here, it would probably be that the emperor and the minister in the play visited the local county government together incognito. A short man with a dark face and a man with a beautiful beard. The former was not as tall as Pei Qian. He was dressed in black and had a white jade belt around his waist. The man held the belt with both hands. It's a pity that the elegant and bearded man next to him is at least a head taller than him. Although Pei Qian was surprised, he still smiled brightly. He used the method of concentrating the sound into a line and said with cupped hands, "Pei Qian has met Zhou Qinghuang and General Fan." The short man nodded. General Fan is responsible for his duties. He needs to patrol various continents during the day. I have nothing to do and follow him around. The man with the beautiful beard smiled and said, "We meet again, little nerd." Pei Qian grinned. I remember that Master's husband once praised the Zhou Qinghuang who was the highest among human beings in front of him. I have never seen such a short person with such a tall and powerful appearance. He is so majestic and majestic. Inexplicably, he became a registered worshipper in Luapa Mountain. The old deaf boy with the Taoist name Long Sheng took a temporary detour. Instead of going directly to Li Huai, he took his disciples away from Shirwanda Mountain and went straight across the Great Wall of Sword Qi with his sword. Gan Tang pinched to the magic formula helped Yu Yu to use the blinding method to hide his whereabouts to avoid unnecessary complications. From a bird's eye view, Yu Yu Yujin saw that on the top of the half-city, there were many groups of monks from other places, scattered in different places admiring the scenery with clumps like flowers. High in the sky where the Jiangxian's private residence was supposed to be, the old deaf boy couldn't help but look back towards the city. He thought he would be stopped by the sage from the Confucian temple who was stationed here, and he would need to report his identity and submit an ultimatum. It was just a formality and the old deaf boy had no grudges about it. After all, he had long been accustomed to being a man with his tail between his legs on the Sword Qi Great Wall. Unexpectedly, he passed the wall so smoothly which made the old deaf boy feel worried. I muttered, the Confucian temple just doesn't treat me as a dish? But if he was really stopped, Gontang would probably complain a few more times. Even if the boss sword immortal is gone, there is still a young Yin official who has recently carved words. Ningyao has just entered the 14th realm, and there is still a seat in the colorful world. As for Feishing City, do you Confucian temple really think that the Great Wall of Sword Qi no longer exists? When we arrived at the ruins of the old city, the old deaf man sighed and fell to the ground first. He revisited his old place, felt sad when he saw the things, paid homage to the historical sites and pondered endlessly. A great monk naturally has the vision of a great monk. The words written by the sages for the human world are actually an invisible cage of heaven and earth for the remnants of the ancient gods. As long as they appear in the world, they need to face the thorns laid and created by these human words. Ordinary masters in the world, practiced Qi scholars, as well as the landscape gods who were enshrined in later dynasties, have little sense of this. However, the higher the realm of the ancient gods and the more refined their golden bodies, the greater the limitations. When people in the world walk on mountain roads full of thorns, it is very easy for their clothes to get hooked and their skin to be pierced. In the same way, the ancient gods appeared from the sky and appeared in the world, just like walking on a thorny road with words. Every step they take will wear out their golden bodies. That's why Zhou personally formulated a new text for the wild world, not only to help the demon clan draw a clear line between Howren and the human race, but also to pave the way for secretly attracting the ancient gods hiding in the sky. Yu Yu whispered, Ning Yao and that senior met, but they didn't seem to ask Master why he could return to the Ascension Realm? Gontang nodded and said unconcernedly, this is probably the spirit of the 14th realm. Below the 14th realm, it's all a matter of idleness. The ups and downs of other people's realms are nothing to talk about. This sneaky and risky return to the dojo, Of course Gontang did more than just go back for a look. Yu asked, "What is master doing here?" Gontang said, "I heard someone say that the alluring taste of hometown lies not in food but in wine." Yu guessed that the young Ingguan told the master. After all, few people in the Great Wall of Sword Qi were willing to chat with their master. The former Jianxi Great Wall roughly consisted of 3 areas: the main city, the private residence of Jianxian to the south of the main city, and the Mirage to the north, which was a mountain market with bustling commerce. Gontang stretched out his hand and pointed to the north. It used to be a beautiful place with wind, flowers, snow and moon, gold and silver flowing, fish and dragons mixed together, and the fairy money in the pocket was more useful than the realm of the monks. Unlike the Great Wall of Sword Qi, much like xianxia, the most criticized aspect of the Great Wall of Sword Qi is the arena created by this mirage. It is more cruel than the Tuli Mountain in Luzhou, Beiju. Every time you go up 2 people, one must die before it is over. Of course, it often happens that both of them die or one of them falls down or is left half-dead man. Now, on the site of that mirage, a place that can barely be called the Immortal Inn has been opened. The main business is accommodation and selling wine, and the side business is selling some unpopular mountain magic artifacts. With the momentum of this inn, a street appeared. Anyone who is able to do business here must have a strong backing for all the twists and turns. Even a deaf child would wonder if one of the masterminds behind the scenes was the private sword of someone from the Sword Qi Great Wall who had returned from a long journey. Regarding the origin of this market, the old deaf child is very familiar with it. There used to be more than 40 large and small buildings there, with pavilions clustered in rows high and low, stacked on top of each other to form a tall building. In the past, Hauran merchants and tourists who came to Daishin Mountain and wanted to take a look at the city were not brave enough, or did not like to go to the main city to get into trouble. They would go to this market to linger for a few days. Anyway, they could not see it from a distance or up close. Yes, look. Some larger sects from the same continent have built guild halls in Mirage to facilitate Taoist friends from the same continent to have a place to stay. Gontang sighed. Back then, the market was a bustling place with lights like daylight and music playing every night. It was said to have 3,000 large houses, shops selling all kinds of rare treasures and items of shady origins, brothels and gambling stalls. Restaurants, openly selling Taoist secrets, private houses and Taoist temples full of spiritual energy, and a large number of anonymous people, who clearly mark the prices and are responsible for helping people point out the key points of practice. Hauran has everything that the world should have, and Hauran has everything that the world should not. Yes, in short, there is everything. Just talk about the kind of mountain spirits who specialize in worshipping the moon and refining qi, and those who are proficient in the magic of the room to collect yang and replenish yin. If you sleep with them, you can make money. With money. You look strange. Gontang blushed and explained, I just heard about it. If Yoyu hadn't taken Gontang as his teacher, he would have followed that giant city to migrate to the colorful world. There are many types of ascension paths for great monks to practice and attain enlightenment, such as daylight, turning into a rainbow, riding a dragon and a crane, rising into the clouds, flying into purple clouds, dismembering corpses, becoming immortals, etc. Different paths lead to different levels of rank. For future generations, it is probably the most enviable thing to rise from a house. One person attains enlightenment, and chickens and dogs ascend to heaven. In the history of the world, there are well-documented stories of people being able to bring their entire family to become immortals. Over the past 10,000 years, there have been only a handful of them. Just like the boss Jianxian just revealed one thing to Chen Pingan, the Summer Palace, the Cold Palace and the SH City Mirage, combined together form a 3-mountain formation. Since it is named 3 mountains, of course it is the work of Mr. Sanshan Jiuho. And the Mirage among them was an ascension platform carefully imitated by the Sword Qi Great Wall, which took a very long time. The foundation of the Mirage was created by the hidden official before Xiao Sun. He was a man with great talents and great plans but bad luck. His realm was too low and he could not live long. The old deaf child had a good relationship with this person at first. In the end, this Mirage became the tip of Qin Kingda's sword that cleared the way and lifted the city up. The great ancestor of Tuiyue Mountain had already expected this, but there was no need to stop Qin Qingdu from using this sword. After all, those who left were all young sword cultivators with very low realms. Even Ning Yao had not reached the Jade Pu realm at that time. If the wilderness wants to kill them all, it will have to pay a huge price to eradicate them. From Qin Qingdu to Qi Tingji, Qin Shi to Lu Ji and Lao Defer etc., they all made different choices back then. What the wild world wants has never been the Great Wall of Sword Chi, which is hard to chew and has only a few ounces of meat. The great ancestor of Toyua Mountain and the group of demons on the throne are staring at the big fat wall. There is a vast world where everything is available except for the word barren. In fact, if Qinqing was willing to give way to the barbaric world and the mountains and rivers of the two continents of the Great Wall of Sword Chi, so what? Not enough. Then in the barbaric world, I will give you the Sword Chi Great Wall Sword Cultivator to establish a religion, and give you Qinqing do everything you need to be called the ancestor. The master and the apprentice walked to the Huangni street. The old deaf boy chose a roadside wine shop with the best business. The shopkeeper was a plump woman with a mole at the corner of her mouth. She wore a soft hat made of various kinds of beautiful jade and made into flowers and plants. Xuanhuan wearing a round-collared green robe. She was leaning against the counter with a relaxed attitude, holding a round fan in her hand, and her appearance was extremely beautiful. The waiter who serves food and drinks in the shop is a young man of low status but full of energy. According to the saying on the mountain, he has deep Taoist roots and a fairy seedling. The woman glanced at the rickety old man and then at the young swordsman. She didn't dare to be scornful and started shouting in person. The old deaf boy asked for a pot of wine and some appetizers. The woman turned to look at the inner door. He opened a yellow bamboo curtain called tong tua and reported the names of several dishes to the kitchen in the backyard. The old deaf boy chose a table next to the street, looked a little higher and saw some wooden signs hanging on the wall. Yoyu frowned slightly, already feeling unhappy when he saw this. How can such an innocent sign be hung casually? The old deaf boy didn't care that the liquor store used this kind of thing as a gimmick to attract customers. Drinking first, food second, the old deaf boy poured the wine and drank by himself, while the apprentice Yoyu didn't drink. The old deaf boy took a sip of the so-called Shili wine. Sure enough, as the waiter said, the wine was poured into the bowl, making a sizzling sound like a cracking sound. Whenever Yoyu had free time, he liked to ask this living almanac master about the past of the Sword Chi Great Wall. During his travels over the years, he had been asking questions from 10,000 years ago to the last 300 years. The old deaf boy was sitting cross-legged on a bench, using chopsticks to stir up a plate of free cold folded ear root. He thought the flavor was not enough, so he asked the landlady for an extra dish of chili oil, poured it on top, picked up a chopstick and chewed slowly. Took another sip of wine and talked to Yoyu from his heart about some things that seemed like yesterday. Ning Yao, Qi Shou, Peng Yuanji and their predecessors, the so-called younger generation of geniuses, have gathered 10 people and called them geniuses, which is actually quite reluctant. This generation belongs to a typical small year with poor harvests. It is incomparable with the previous generation. If compared with Ning Yao's generation, it is even less impressive. Among them, the most favored person, Mi Quan, who had the best qualifications, was recognized as an early genius. It was said that he was a master of Jindan sword at the age of 20. Unfortunately, he died in battle soon after leaving the city. This kind of thing is never a special case in the Sword Chi Great Wall, but the norm. 7 people, including Mi Quan, died early. There are 3 left. Wang Zongping, who was originally the last one in terms of qualifications, was a bit of a late bloomer. He successfully entered the Yuan-Ing realm step by step. However, he was injured in a battle and broke one of his natal flying swords. He has been stagnant in Yuan-Ing for a long time. Yingjing, probably a blessing in disguise, has become an old Yuan-Ing in the ascension city of xianxia. Although he has never been to a certain wine shop, he is now the swordsman who respects the young hermit officials the most. The other 2 have different life experiences. Su Yong's sword training qualification is second only to Mi Quan, but he is afraid of death. In fact, we can't say that he is afraid of death. He just refuses to fight with his life every time. He always thinks that when he reaches the Yupu realm, he can find an immortal. The Jingyao clan wanted to make a quick and easy exchange of lives so that the business would be more profitable. Unexpectedly, in the end, a retreat that seemed to have the right time, place and people came together, resulting in an alchemy room that was broken into pieces and fell directly into the realm. Not only was there no being able to reach the Jade Pu realm in one fell swoop, but instead become a tattered golden elixir with a shattered sword heart. This is a big joke in the Great Wall of Sword Chi. Instead of being injured on the battlefield and falling into the realm, on the contrary, he did not break through the realm in seclusion and came out of seclusion. There is no sword cultivator who is more looked down upon than this. Hearing this, Yoyu nodded and said, I often saw Su Yong when I was a child. Although he had gone off grains and had a diet of whole grains, he could have stopped the fireworks in the world. But when Yo-Yo waited for the dishes to be served, he still asked the waiter for 2 bowls of rice. Those who eat their breath are immortals, and those who do not eat their breath are gods. Some qi practitioners often feel nauseous and vomiting when they smell the qi of fire and food in the food. Fortunately for the genealogy monks, the sect has its own immortal medicated diet and elixirs, but the mountain and wild cultivators suffer. The old deaf boy shook his wine bowl, and Su Yong was a bad drunkard and addicted to gambling. He also liked to visit brothels, refused to pay back the money he owed all year round, and defaulted on debts to avoid debts. He travels back and forth between the city and the mirage here all year round, doing some shady business, running errands for people and earning some price difference. Whoever is willing to treat him to a drink is his uncle. To say that a sword cultivator who fell from nascent soul to golden core is still a land swordsman who cannot be underestimated in other places. There may be criticism behind his back, but he will definitely not be sarcastic in person. It is a pity that Su Yong is in the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Then I became someone's follower and my life got a little better. Who is so-and-so? Who else could it be? That person once advised Su Yong to go to xianxia. I believe the reason was just to move trees and move dead people. The golden elixir sword cultivator in xianxia is still very popular. It can be seen that Su Yong was indeed tempted, otherwise I wouldn't go to the gate from time to time, but I didn't go there in the end. Since he is a golden elixir, he followed him to the colorful world? No. When Yo-Yo heard this answer, he knew there was no need to ask about the ending and started to eat with his head down. The old deaf child continued. Su Yong shaved his beard, put on clean clothes, secretly went to the battlefield, picked up a standard long sword produced by the sword workshop, and killed some barbarians. There were not many, so he couldn't save it. A golden elixir's military exploits were sneak attacked and assassinated by a demon monk passing by the battlefield. In the end, it was still a loss-making business. As for Wang Wei, a sword cultivator in the Yupu realm, he mysteriously disappeared together with his Taoist companion on the battlefield. When this person was in the golden elixir realm, he was worshipped by the Qi family. Later, when he joined Yupu, he was allowed to open his own house as a rule and married a woman with a famous surname from Yuhu Street. About 50 years ago, 90-year-old Wang Wei successfully entered the upper 5 realms. If Su Yong is said to be a loser, it is understandable. Then Wang Wei, who likes drinking and fawning over everyone, is a bit looked down upon. Yo-Yo asked tentatively, then Wang Wei has taken refuge with the wild monster clan? The old deaf child said casually, that's what I said. He secretly went to Shaosun and Luoshan. But I didn't see it with my own eyes, so I can't say what it must be. Yo-Yo asked, Master, doesn't it seem that you particularly want to go to Luapa Mountain to make offerings? The old deaf boy raised the wine bowl, took a sip of the wine and answered the question. This person, as soon as he has the thought of freedom, he will immediately become unfree. In the past, when he was in charge of the prison at Jianghu Great Wall, the old man felt very at ease. He could always find some entertainment to relieve his boredom. Now that I am out of trouble, it seems that the sky is high and my own level is not low. Instead, I always feel that I am hitting a wall and being too restricted. The old deaf boy took a big sip of wine, shrugged his shoulders, burped and said with a smile, as long as you are happy, don't worry about master's complaints. Children celebrate the new year with great joy, always thinking about new clothes and lucky money. As adults celebrate the new year, they will inevitably be entangled in extra expenses or debt repayments. At this moment, a new guest came to the door. He was wearing a green shirt and a long coat, with a sword on his back and a wine flask. He laughed with the master and his disciples from his heart and said, Fellow Taoist Long Xing, you are in despair just because you don't want to bend down. Shan, are you just hiding here and drinking? The old deaf boy smiled awkwardly. Listen, these words hurt my feelings. Yo-Yo looked excited. The man stretched out his hand and pressed a few times to make Yo-Yo sit. He looked up at the nothing sign on the wall of the wine shop, smiled, sat next to Yo-Yo and waited for him to take the book. The old deaf boy had already raised his buttocks and stretched out his hand to fill the wine bowl belonging to Yo-Yo, and hurriedly filled the bowl of wine for Lord Yingguan. Chen Pingan picked up the bowl, bumped it lightly with the old deaf boy's wine bowl, took another sip of wine and asked the price. He learned that a pot of Shili wine cost 3 snow coins and said with a smile, It's obvious that the pig was killed. Is it over? There was no need to greet customers in the shop for the time being. The young waiter stood next to the proprietress. He was unhappy when he heard these words, but the woman patted his arm gently to signal him not to be impulsive. She was full of energy, staring at the slender man who was about 30 years old. A pair of long autumn eyes seemed to have golden threads flowing, and the vision was extremely subtle, just like a dragon swimming in the big lake. She obviously used a hidden gaze. Supernatural powers. Although she couldn't see clearly the other person's cultivation base, she knew that the wine tables near the door had more origins than the other, especially the swordsman in blue, who had the most impressive appearance. At least it was certain that this person had an official status in the mountain. Not small. Compared with the kind of people in the blue sarong of the Yamashita dynasty who are destined to be either prime ministers or bachelors, they have several more green, purple, and red Tao Chi. Unfortunately, she is not very advanced in the Chi Tao practice, so she can only look at an abstract general scene but unable to identify the depth of those Tao Chi. If the headmaster were here in person, he might be able to see more of the secrets. The old deaf child asked in his heart, "Master Xuanhuan, do you need me to remind her that she has violated the taboo on the mountain?" Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "No need." The old deaf boy asked in confusion, "Why doesn't Xuanhuan stay with Ning Yatu?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "If you don't say this, I will return to Aquarius continent soon." Unexpectedly, the woman actually carried a bottle of wine, walked around the counter, took the initiative to get close to her, and stood by the table. "Can I have a seat?" The old deaf child glanced at Qin Pingan, who turned a blind eye to this and turned a deaf ear to her. The old deaf child could only wave his hands and said, "It's inconvenient, shopkeeper." She looked calm and did not leave. Instead, she began to introduce herself. "My surname is Wei Ming Yudian. I come from Zhujiang Xianxia sword sect and was born in the Partridge Palace. I signed up for the Number Master sect because I was worried that the 3 distinguished guests would suspect whether I had any intentions." Unpredictable. As soon as these words came out, whispers suddenly broke out in the shop. Obviously he is no stranger to the Xianxia sword sect. The young man raised his eyebrows, looking quite pleased with himself. Following the master's anonymity here and opening a shop to sell drinks, the young man has long been feeling cowardly. Today I can finally show my name as a master openly and openly. The old deaf boy said nothing. Yoyu has long been resentful of this shop, and even pretends to be deaf and dumb. Qin Pingan smiled and asked, "Forgive me for being ignorant, may I ask where my friend is from?" Yoyu suppressed laughter. The female cultivator who called herself Wei Yudian looked slightly sluggish, but she still had a good face and explained in a good tone. "It is located in Liuxia continent, and is a close neighbor of Tianyu Cave Heaven for thousands of years." She really didn't believe that this person had never heard of her own Zhujiang Xianxia sword sect. Although the other person was deliberately pretending to be stupid, she would not become angry. The leaders on the mountain in Liuxia continent mainly have one visible figure and one hidden figure. The former is Jianghu from the Ascension realm of Qinggong Mountain, and the latter is the couple from Tianyu Cave. The Xianxia sword sect is not comparable to these 2 mountain forces and is considered a first-rate sect in Liuxia continent, otherwise she would not have deliberately said the term family friend. The Taoist tradition of Xianxia sword sect mainly includes 3 branches: Lishan, Xuanfu and Qingyang. Partridge Palace is the core of the Xuanfu branch. The previous palace mistress of the Partridge Palace, Hua Ferong, was the founder and first head of the Xianxia sword sect. She was a great swordsman renowned in several continents and had passed down 3 sword veins. It is said that after practicing Taoism for 3,000 years, he became tired of the world and became an immortal, and then dissipated into water. Hua Ferong is Wei Yudian's mentor. Wang Hujing, the contemporary head of the Xianxia sword sect, is a Jade Pu realm swordsman. In terms of seniority, he still needs to call Wei Yudian his uncle. Our ancestors were rich and our family had a strong financial background. Now our family has never been in decline. There is no sign of decline. It is just that its power is not as strong as when it was at its peak. Such a sect in the mountains will have smooth sailing wherever it goes. And people like Wei Yudian are at least well known on this street now. Her family is a wealthy and ancient existence at the foot of Wuxiaza mountain. They belong to a powerful Taoist family. They have built an ancestral altar where they can confer and add urns. It was once the talisman promotion altar for various Taoist sects in Izhou and the Wei family altar. It is said to have 12 kinds of urns and 24 kinds of talismans, which is relatively rare in the world. In addition, the Wei family also has a commendable tradition. Most of the women are beauties who have conquered the country. In almost every generation, there are several women who are either queens of a certain country or queen mothers of a certain dynasty. And her personal disciple Wang Ku was the young boy who had a close connection with the immortal family. When he was born, a green Polonia tree suddenly grew in front of his door, and there were immortals and ghosts singing songs from it. The reason for this trip down the mountain was because the master, who was proficient in fortune-telling, had figured out that the young man would have an opportunity here. Sure enough, Wang Ke saw a ray of light at night at the site of the mirage that had been dug up for a long time, and finally the young man got a dagger. As for the cook who was called Bronze Camel by her, he became an old thing among the thorn bushes and became the guardian of the Xianxia sword sect. Yoyu asked in her heart, "Master, have you heard of this Xianxia sword sect?" The old deaf child thought for a while. A long time ago, there seemed to be a little girl who came to the Great Wall of Sword Chi to practice for decades. She had good qualifications. She didn't have a teacher, she only had family education. She got her pills here. While refining swords at the top of the city, I also got the inheritance of 1 or 2 ancient sword veins. The little girl was not a good drinker and she liked to curse people when she drank. She had a good relationship with Xiao Sun, and they often acted naughty together. Later, the little girl, after joining the nascent soul, she became a tiger. She was gearing up all day long, thinking only about killing a Jade Poo realm monster monk. However, for some reason she was driven home by the boss sword immortal. When I heard that she was returning to her hometown, I was very worried. Soon she established the Xianxia sect, and I guess she was the founder of the Xianxia sword sect. After that, intermittently, disciples came here to practice killing monsters, mostly women. The last group of disciples seemed to have no sword cultivation. This is normal, xianxia over there. Sword cultivators are expensive, and I don't dare to throw it away casually here at the Great Wall of Sword Chi. Yoyu nodded and said, "It sounds like it's an immortal mansion with a good reputation." He looked at the fake nothing sign on the wall again and found it a little more pleasing to his eye. Qin Pingan asked with a smile, "Senior Long Xing?" The old deaf boy had no choice but to stretch out his hand and say, "Fellow Taoist Wei, it's a pleasure to meet you. We, the master and the disciple, have long admired your sect. Let's sit down and chat." Wei Yudian first asked his disciples to hang up a closed wooden sign. As soon as they heard that she was the owner of the Partridge Palace of the Xianxia sword sect, half of the guests in the wine shop started to toast to her, and Wei Yudian had no choice but to greet them politely. The old deaf man smiled and watched her finish her work. When she sat down again, he got straight to the point and asked, "What do you want to talk to us about, fellow Taoist Wei?" Wei Yudian said, "Let me take the liberty of asking first, will the 3 distinguished guests continue to go south or go back?" The old deaf boy said, "No surprise, we are going to Howran." Wei Yudian smiled and said, "Then let me tell you the truth. Without beating around the bush, can you invite fellow Taoists to our Xianxia sword sect as a guest?" The old deaf boy waved his hand and said, "I have already agreed to the invitation of this, fellow Taoist Chen to be a worshipper." Wei Yudian suddenly understood, turned around and asked, "May I ask Dao Yuchen where is the fairyland?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "A small place, Aquarius Island." Wei Yudian praised, "Although Dongbaiping's Hao is a small place, there are countless strange people and strangers." Qin Pingan nodded and said, "That's why I need to invite Senior Long Xing to my house on the hilltop to hold a meeting. I also hope that Wei Daoyu, a gentleman, will not take advantage of others and don't cut off halfway things." Wei Yudian raised the wine bowl and drank it all in one gulp. "How dare you?" The old deaf man had actually seen the fatigue of the young official, and he really couldn't imagine who could let him be so seriously injured now. At the Jinchi Great Wall, Old Deffer adheres to the principle of doing less than doing more, and has always behaved indifferently. Therefore, until now, he has not asked the reason for this matter. Old Deffer took the initiative to bring up the wine bowl and said, "I represent Dao Yuchen, have a drink." Wei Yudian drank another bowl of wine and said with a wry smile, "Unlike our Liuxia Island, the grass does not grow under the pines and cypresses." Qin Pingan smiled and seemed not to understand what she meant. The old deaf child was a little surprised. She had just drank half a kilogram of wine, and then she started uttering the truth after drinking? Wei Yudian squeezed out a smile and said, "My master used to often say that to refine a sword, you have to cross the hanging mountain. To learn from immortals, you need to learn from heavenly immortals. Both swordsmanship and immortal techniques must be directed towards the great road." The old deaf child echoed, informed. "Look at each other with Mr. Yin Guan. When we get to Luapa Mountain in the future, we won't need this kind of wine table entertainment every day, right?" "Of course not, Luo Mountain is very clean, just in case you don't think it's lively enough." Wei Yudian looked at the lush street outside the door and heard her sigh for no reason. The wind and clouds are meeting, wars are breaking out, vertical and horizontal fights are going on, dragons and snakes are rising, and all the people are flying. The old deaf child looked at Qin Pingan again. What kind of medicine was she selling in this gourd? After all, he is a Yuanying realm sword cultivator who comes from a sect. How can he be so heartfelt to the three of us? She smoothed her hair on her temples, and the breeze blew her noodles and wine away. In the sea of right and wrong, it is difficult to travel straight. The family's internal and external troubles, and the sect's immediate and distant worries made her, who had always been clear-minded, feel that her future was bleak. What's more, Wei Yudian also received a secret letter personally written by the leader, and someone was already on his way here. She is a nascent soul but not a sword cultivator. How can she get rid of the entanglement of a jade purity sword immortal who, on the surface, still holds great righteousness and principles? To be honest, the master calculated a prophecy for my disciple Wang Ku, which has a total of 18 words. I couldn't figure it out when I came down from the mountain, but now it has come true. Wei Yudian stretched out his hand and asked Wang Ku to come over and sit with him. He spoke to everyone in his heart. The purple book is passed down in the Mirage Tower. Carefully carry the dagger. Kill first and then seal the title. Chen Pingon held his hands in his sleeves, half asleep and half awake, as if he was taking a nap with his eyes squinted. Wei Yudian said, "Before this, my disciple also got an opportunity. Wang Ku, don't have any scruples and deliberately conceal this matter. Tell the truth yourself and the three seniors." Wang Ku was obviously a little reluctant, but since it was the master who had spoken, he had no choice but to take out a rusty bronze dagger from his sleeve. "I got this by accident in an abandoned Taoist temple called Zhangrenguan. A dagger, the exact year and month of which cannot be ascertained, is engraved with two seal characters, namely Zhao and Su." Chen Pingon raised his eyes and explained with a smile. "If I am not mistaken, Zhao is the country's surname, and Su is the people's surname. The Zhao dagger in the sleeve was bought from Mrs. Su." The young man was doubtful. "It's as gloomy as falling clouds and mist, but it's not like all the Taoist cultivators in the world are so sincere and heartfelt words to everyone, right?" The old deaf child could only ask in his heart, "Master Yin Guan, you are well informed and can you tell me something? If she keeps digging her heart out like this, she will almost think of me as an ancestor. I'm so stupid." Chen Pingon said slowly, "It is said that a new sect has arisen in a certain dynasty next door to Wei Yudian's family. It is aggressive and wants to compete with the Si Jian sect for the nominal third throne of Liuxia continent. This rising star, who was founded less than a century ago, has a good relationship with Qinggong Mountain and Tianyu Cave Heaven. The young sect leader has a complicated relationship with the Wei family, which puts great pressure on the Xianxia sword sect. It is estimated that she saw that her predecessors had deep moral qi, so she became ill and sought medical treatment in a hurry. She wanted to find external help. It would be best if she was related to the Great Wall of Sword Qi so that the other party would not dare to act rashly. There is a position of etiquette officer in her sect, named Guanxia. During every celebration, there are one or two people from the three paths of Lishan, Qingyang and Xuanfu. They must be middle five sword cultivators to hold the position. One of them was born in a noble family in Tianhuang, and was close friends with the young master of Tianyudong Tianshu. For some reason he was the youngest champion in the history of Xianxia sword sect, and this person who had high hopes was given up by the Zhushitang. He was removed from the genealogy and expelled from the country. I guess her boss not only helped Wang Ku with his fortune-telling, but also helped her with her fortune-telling. By coming here she can escape from marriage and take refuge at the same time. For example, if we calculated it early, she might meet an expert like Senior Long Xing here, a secretive old swordsman. The old deaf man's eyes suddenly lit up, and he ignored the old swordsman and the swordsman. Escape from marriage? In addition to the hatred of the country and the resentment of the masters, is there a story about makeup and powder? Chen Pingon stopped talking and didn't want to talk about this. I met the old deaf man, chatted a few words, and waited to return to the capital of Yuxuan Kingdom on time. Of course, the old deaf boy didn't covet the beauty of Wei Yudian. At his age and state he couldn't get enough of the beauty in the world. What's more, Gontang has been practicing Taoism all his life, and he has a very indifferent view of male love and female love, which is not a good thing. As for Wei Yudian's clumsy trick, the old deaf boy saw through it at a glance. Her appearance was indeed worthy of the title of Qingqing, and her figure was even better. She was so skinny in the areas where she should be thin, but she was so fat in the areas where she should be that she still trembled despite the looseness of her robe. Trembling. It is obviously the beauty of hibiscus growing out of clear water, but it has all kinds of charming charm. Wei Yudian looked at the middle-aged man with a strong official aura, and said bravely, I would like to ask the name of the Sword Immortal's immortal mansion. However, she only saw the swordsman in green clothes closing his eyes and concentrating. It was obvious that he did not want to wade into troubled waters and did not want to get involved in her personal grudges. But the reason why she acted so brazenly was because she grasped a life-saving straw, because in the leader's hexagram, there is a sentence, "Stop when encountering a dragon and you will be happy when you are young." No matter how thick-skinned Wei Yudian was, he couldn't hold him back by force. After thinking about it, he had to put aside his thoughts temporarily, said goodbye, and walked back to the counter with his apprentice. The old deaf boy shook his sleeves, counted his fingers in his head, and made up a hexagram on the spur of the moment. If God does not favor beauty, beauties will have a bad fate. Therefore the people of Qingqing are now unavailable. But even though the old deaf boy was in the Sword Qi Great Wall and no one took him seriously, he was actually quite knowledgeable and talented. After all, in that prison he had to find something to do to spend his time. The conversation in the wine shop was noisy and people were drunk. It was inevitable that they would mention the battle at the top of the city. Some people were wondering why the old swordsman only handed over a sword when he was so skilled in swordsmanship. Some people asked about Qin Zai's whereabouts and some admired Qi Tingji and Long Xiang. Some of the sword sects were full of praise for Lin Junbai, a group of swordsmen from outside the Summer Palace. However, when someone mentioned the last hermit official who was in the limelight, there was a dispute. There were praises and criticisms. The former said that he could. "What else can I do if I engrave words on the city head?" The latter said that the formation of troops at his summer palace was very ordinary and not outstanding. Yu lowered his head and squinted his eyes. The hand holding the chopsticks used his thumb to rub his index finger. 7 or 8 tables of drinkers, young Qi cultivators from all over the world, all became interested when talking about the young hermit official. They all had their own opinions. Most of the young monks, the men, devalued him, while the women mostly praised him. Wei Yudian couldn't stand listening anymore and couldn't help but defend the young hermit official who was far away. "Everyone, it is easy to talk about the faults of the ancients after the ancients. It is difficult to do the things of the ancients in the position of the ancients. This is the truth. Not everything is clear to bystanders." If nothing else is said, just that he was able to invite the old swordsman Qi, Xingguan Haosu and the others rushed to Toyue Mountain together, which shows that the boss swordsman chose him in the early years. As a hidden official, he chose the right person. The old deaf boy didn't pay much attention to these discussions. He looked at the sleepy Qin Pingan and said in his heart, "Lord Yin Guan?" Qin Pingan opened his eyes and asked doubtfully, "Ha?" The old deaf child said cautiously, "Did you have a quarrel with Ning Yao?" It stands to reason that Qin Pingan had never complained about anything he suffered in prison earlier. There was no reason for him to return to Howren's world now, and everything was peaceful. He had 2 sects, and now he was here to help and became a registered worshipper. Let's just say it's more powerful than a tiger. Let's just say that in Aquarius continent, who dares to compete with Luo Shan? Even though Qin Pingan looked seriously injured at the moment, he shouldn't be so depressed. After much deliberation, the thing that could make Qin Pingan so depressed must be Ning Yao. Is it any wonder that when Ning Yao showed up at Xuandashan, Qin Pingan came right after him? Dare one run and the other chase? The young couple is having a conflict and is angry? Qin Pingan rubbed his forehead. "This is nothing." The old deaf boy smiled and said, "That's right, I must have misunderstood. How dare you quarrel with Ning Yao?" Qin Pingan said helplessly, "Thank you for your understanding." The old deaf child became more and more curious. "What's going on?" Qin Pingan laughed angrily and said, "I just had a fight and took a nap when I was sleepy. Do I still need to report and explain to you?" The old deaf boy stopped talking and was so angry that he probably had a quarrel with Ning Yao. Could it be that Ning Yao came to Howren quietly this time and accidentally bumped into Qin Pingan and did something shady? Qin Pingan didn't care about the old deaf boy's guessing, so he cheered up and started chatting with Yu. Yu's face was flushed and she was very reserved. On the street, a noble man in white clothes and bare feet appeared, with disheveled hair, loose clothes and long sleeves, and a long sword on his waist. Keenly aware of the fierce and abnormal aura of the sword immortal outside, Wei Yudian's face instantly turned pale and colorless inside the shop. The rest of the drinkers were not sophisticated enough and had not yet sensed the grand visit of the young sword immortal, the young sect master of Liuxia continent. The free and uninhibited noble son walked forward slowly and said with a smile from his heart, "It is only natural to pay back debts. Wei Yudian, where can you escape? I owe you 100 years and I have to charge you an interest first. It's better to hit him another day." Son, the sky is high and the land is vast, you and I are not as good as Yaha? Don't worry, with my sword skills I can isolate the world and the world at my fingertips. We can see people walking outside, but you don't have to worry about the spring light leaking out. There was a girl in a mink hat with rosy cheeks, strutting from the other end of the street to the liquor store. She stared at the poor guy who had a brain problem with wide eyes. Absolutely no, 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 should not say such a thing at this time. Otherwise, in broad daylight, acting so casually, it would actually be nothing. The young swordsman narrowed his eyes and smiled. Huh? Do you recognize me? Otherwise, you can't be able to hear my heart, right? The girl in the mink hat didn't know whether she was pretending to be stupid or was scared, so she ran quickly into the wine shop. The young swordsman came to her side in one step and stretched out his hand to hold down the mink hat on her head. The girl muttered, "Mani Mani, don't touch me." She gave a random slap. The famous swordsman in the continent instantly turned into a rainbow and traveled far away. With a bang, he fell heavily on the distant city wall. His body became limp, slipped to the ground and passed out. Wei Yudian took a deep breath, passed by the girl in the mink hat, and came to the door of the wine shop. She raised her eyes and looked around like falling clouds. "Where are people?" Xiego laughed and said, "The mountain master is here too, what a coincidence. I was in retreat earlier, so please forgive me, the mountain master." The old deaf boy stood up quickly. "The person in front of me is Bai Jing. That swordsman Bai Jing who liked to take names from others in ancient times." Xiego patted Gontang the shoulder and said in an old-fashioned way, "From now on when you go to the mountain, you should keep a low profile and work honestly. By the way, you will be the general worshipper and I will be the secondary worshipper." Every time the girl in the mink hat reached out to pat him, the old deaf boy tilted his shoulders and forced a smile. Qin Pingon counted the time. It was almost time to return to Aquarius continent. He stood up and looked up at the wooden signs on the wall. The mountain master was like this. As soon as he sat down, Xiego and the old deaf boy had no choice but to get up and glance at the men in the room. Yoyu nodded and smiled in greeting with a male swordsman, because this man was the only man who spoke well of Yinguan from beginning to end. The latter didn't know what was going on, but he still smiled back. Then he saw the man in green shirt who was vaguely the leader, carrying a sword, and asked with a smile, looking at the accent, "Is he from Luzhou in Beiju?" The Beiju Luzhou sword cultivator who was sharing the table with others for a drink nodded and said, "Shanza Yeshio, this is my first time here." The blue shirt swordsman smiled gently, "Then can I buy you a drink? Help you settle the bill?" The man smiled generously and said, "This is so kind." The opponent bowed his hands to say goodbye, and the swordsman had no choice but to stand up and return the salute with cupped fists. A chance encounter, no need to ask each other's names. The swordsman in green shirt turned and left, took out a few snow coins and placed them on the counter. He crossed the threshold first and left the liquor store. The girl in the mink hat clasped the back of her head with both hands, swaying her shoulders, and followed closely. The old man put his hands behind his back, lowered his head and bent his waist to follow. The young swordsman repairs the queen. The drinkers in the wine shop did not take that group of people seriously. 1 immortal, 2 ascendants and 1 golden elixir. Just 4 sword cultivators. The sword cultivator who drank for no reason suddenly asked, "What do you think?" The man at the door stopped and turned around, thinking for a moment. "We can borrow that principle from shopkeeper Wei." Pause for a moment. The man said, "It is easy to judge my faults after me. But it is difficult to do my things in my position." There was silence in the wine shop at first, and then bursts of laughter with some people sneering. Someone said in amusement, "Who do you think you are?" The man smiled and said, "I am Qin Pingon. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.